Every video here on 616 Entertainment is made possible by my supporters over on Patreon. If you enjoyed the show here today, consider signing up. You'll get early access, exclusive videos and podcasts and more. Pro Wrestling Tees has the merch. As always, thank you for watching. Freddy vs. Jason. This 2003 horror classic delivered exactly what we'd all hoped and dreamed for. The Springwood slasher, the burnt and gnarled face of the Nightmare on Elm Street franchise, Freddy Krueger, going to war with the legendary butcher of Camp Crystal Lake, Jason Voorhees. In between their blood-soaked showdowns, the bodies of the innocent pile up. What's not to love? I first saw Freddy vs. Jason on a bootleg DVD that was so blurry that certain parts had me wondering what the hell was going on, but that didn't stop me from watching this one over and over again. I was 13 years old and this movie had it all. Blood, boobs, and two icons of horror fighting to a finish. The movie ends on a cliffhanger, with Jason Voorhees emerging from the waters of Crystal Lake with Freddy's severed head, seemingly establishing him as the ultimate winner. That is until Freddy winks at the camera, letting us all know that this was just the beginning. And then, it wasn't. Freddy vs. Jason 2 never happened. Over the years, I wrote my own damn sequels. I've pitched Freddy vs. Jason 2 as a video game on podcasts dating back more than 5 years. I wanted this story to continue so badly that I guess I just never shut the hell up about it. And here we are in 2022, and I'm still on the same subject. But this time I'm coming at it from a different perspective. I'm here today to tell you that Freddy vs. Jason 2 does exist. And no, I'm not talking about some fugazi, unfinished script that was never produced and that's why you've not heard of it, because it's not real. The sequel is a graphic novel that brought a third horror icon into the mix, Ash Williams from the Evil Dead franchise. Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash takes the colossal main event of the 2003 film and cranks the blood dial up to 11. This is a triple threat match booked in the abyss of our childhood nightmares. But can this concept survive the transition from the big screen to the printed page? You might be wondering how the hell this is an officially released DC Comics and Dynamite Entertainment co-published graphic novel that was sold in stores across the country, and yet you've never heard of it. Here's the thing. Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash's first issue hit store shelves 15 years ago. It's not like this thing dropped last month and just went under the radar. No, it's been out there since 2007, and it's been out of print for years. You're not going to walk into your local comic shop and find this on the shelf for $17.99 anymore. Ask me how I know. Yes, I paid $125 for this book so I could create this review for you guys. Before we get into the story itself, let's cover why Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash is a graphic novel rather than a movie. Because, it was supposed to be a movie. The treatment was presented by Jeff Katz, a New Line Cinema producer who worked on the first Freddy vs. Jason. He also worked for WCW back in the 90s, which might seem irrelevant to this story, but it's really not. You see, in wrestling, you hear stories about certain guys not wanting to lose, or not wanting to look weak. That doesn't work for me, brother. Well, the first major stopping point in Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash as a film came in the shape of New Line Cinema being concerned with the premise of Freddy Krueger, their most valuable horror property, losing too many fights. And if this sounds ridiculous, number one, it is. He's a fictional character. It's not real. Think about it. Don't Freddy and Jason and Chucky and insert another horror icon here, don't they lose at the end of all of their movies anyway? Number two, even if it is ridiculous, it's true. It comes straight from the mouth of Freddy Krueger himself, the legendary Robert Englund. It's worth noting that, like a true professional, Englund couldn't give less of a shit whether Freddy Krueger won at the end of the day. He was all about Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash and was bummed when it didn't materialize. Bruce Campbell, the man behind the Ash Williams character, has also spoken up on the topic. Unlike Englund, Campbell was not keen on the triple threat idea, even going so far as to call it creatively bankrupt. He also pointed to money being a major factor as well. Man, just like wrestling, the movie business is full of politic and carnies too, isn't it? We open up with Laurie and Will, the only two survivors from the Freddy vs. Jason movie, traveling back to Camp Crystal Lake. 5 years have passed since that horrifying night, and Molly needs to make sure that Freddy and Jason are truly dead. If this sounds like a bad idea, it's because it is. Don't believe me? You don't have to. Ask Molly and Will themselves. Oh wait, they're both savagely murdered by Jason inside of the first 10 pages. Holy shit! In case you were wondering, no, we are not playing around here. Narrating this entire scene, quite cynically I might add, is the new star of the show, Ash Williams. He's not coming here to fight Jason, though. No, he's just been called into the local S-Mart to whip their home decor section into shape. Isn't that fantastic? Jason brings the corpses of Molly and Will home to Mommy, and oh my god, Jason keeps Freddy's severed head right next to his mother's. This is tremendous. This is where Freddy comes into play. How the hell is he still going, you might ask, seeing as though he's bodiless? Well, Freddy's dead. At this point, he exists purely inside the mind of Jason. Being in Jason's mind allows him to explore the nooks and crannies of Jason's memories, and that's how Freddy comes up with his plan. You see, way back when Jason was just a little baby boy, old Pamela Voorhees would read little Jason passages from her favorite book, the Necronomicon, straight out of the Evil Dead movies. And before you say, come on, that's a little far-fetched, don't forget, we saw the Necronomicon in Jason's house all the way back in 1993's Jason Goes to Hell, The Final Friday. This might feel like some shoehorned together nonsense, but it's not. It all lines up perfectly well, which is awesome. And it also finally offers an explanation for where Jason's powers come from. He's a fucking Deadite. Come on, dude. Freddy, acting as something of an abusive father figure to Jason, through his nightmares and imagination, convinces Jason to retrieve the Book of the Dead so that he can free himself from Jason's mind and regain his body. Jason heads out in search of the book. He's cutting people down left and right on his way to his old house, and wouldn't you know it, Ash is on his way there too. He caught wind of this Jason fella and his deeds, and having heard this same song and dance before, he knows what needs to be done. He needs the Book of the Dead to send this ghoul away for good. While he's down in the basement retrieving the book, Jason is absolutely slaughtering the trespassing teenagers upstairs. A battle between the two is teased, but Ash and his allies are able to narrowly escape for a second. They head back to the store, and guess who followed them all the way there? Heads are chopped in half, innocent people are torn apart, and the first fight is on. Ash is cracking jokes with his attacks, Jason's throwing him through walls. The art is so perfectly drawn up that you can imagine exactly what this would have looked like in live action. This first showdown comes to an end with the book in Jason's hand, and Ash in a heap on the floor. Jason stomps back to his lair, presents the book to Freddy, and guess who's back? The Dream Master, in the flesh, once again. We're only halfway through this story, and I don't know about you guys, but for me, this is shaping up way better than I ever could have imagined. I'm serious when I call Freddy vs. Jason a classic. Sure, there's some bad acting, and the story kind of reiterates itself 10 times, just in case you're an idiot. That was some thunder out there that I'm not going to edit out because it's cool. But on the fun scale, Freddy vs. Jason is up there with the best of them. But adding a third major player to the battle that is this story could have been too much. It could have been overkill in the worst way. But it's not. Ash Williams is awesome and he fits in perfectly. The reason I think Ash works so well as the new lead is because he does cool shit. You weren't rooting for Laurie and Will in the first Freddy vs. Jason movie. I've been calling Laurie Molly throughout most of this video just to see if you'd notice. Did you notice? Probably not, because you don't care. There's the proof. Freddy and Jason are doing cool shit. We were rooting for the bad guys in that first movie. Now we're rooting for a lead that we can get behind because he's doing cool shit. It's not that hard to figure out. But let's not get too sidetracked. Let's get back to business. Ash and the S-Mart survivors hide out for the night, and before long, Mr. Williams dozes off. When he wakes up, it's a miracle. The hand the Deadites forced him to chop off all those years ago has regenerated. Yeah, right. This is Freddy's doing, the sick bastard. That's just like old Krueger, isn't it? Dangling that carrot in front of his prey. Ash, without missing a beat, uses a chainsaw to cut his hand off again. As blood pools on the floor, the individual droplets form into tiny little Freddys until they all coagulate together into the real deal. What a fucking entrance, man. There's a struggle, and before the good guys can escape, Freddy slips into one of their dreams. A good trick never goes out of style. Business picks up when the remaining crew set a trap for the oncoming Freddy and Jason tag team, and we see Jason actually outsmarting the good guys. He notices and avoids their traps. He even turns to them and wags his finger as if to say, This is because Freddy, as a thank you for retrieving the book in the first place, used it to grace Jason with some basic street smarts. He's not going to wind up doing your algebra homework, but hey, it's better than nothing, right? Ash is able to make it to the Book of the Dead before anybody else when wham! Freddy pounces. Oh, and Ash wasn't first. Freddy's already used the book to grant himself godlike powers that now allow him to manipulate the real world just like the dream world. This is a problem. It also gives us the return of what I call Red Devil Freddy. I always loved this look from the Freddy vs. Jason movie, and am happy to see it here. Freddy, having gotten all he needed out of Jason, calls off the Alliance. He raises the slain enemies of Jason's past to take care of the big man, and he possesses the entire forest that Ash is attempting to escape through. This is haunting stuff right here. And after Ash is forced to fight off a gang of little demon girls conjured by the Dream Master, we head into the climax. The plan is this. Ash will go toe-to-toe with the gruesome twosome in a triple threat for the ages, and when the time is right, the sole survivor, Carrie, will read the passage from the Book of the Dead, banishing Freddy and Jason to the evil Deadite dimension forever. The amazing moments here are too numerous to count them all, so I'll just hit you with some highlights. Freddy's promo on Carrie here is one of his greatest of all time.
Oh, God.
God? Is that who you want? I can give you God. This is my body. It is your bread. This is my blood. It is your wine. Bread and wine, all for you, Caroline. Now eat me, bitch. Ha 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 ha!
Ash cuts Jason's mask in half with his chainsaw, revealing a rotting, putrid face. This look has become famous amongst hardcore fans, many of whom have customized their collectible masks in tribute. When Ash cuts Jason's hand off, Jason plunges his machete blade into the stump, to which Ash remarks, "I guess there truly are no original ideas left." Fantastic. When taunting Freddy and Jason to come get him, Ash compares the incoming battle to working in retail for 10 years. Ash is the man. Like I said, we don't have time to cover everything, but there are so many moments here that just ooze greatness. Shotgun blast through Jason's chest. Freddy clones himself and Jason starts cutting them all into bits. This final showdown is a main event anywhere in the world. Ash is getting pinballed between Jason and Freddy, just tossed around like a toy, and that's when Carrie recites the Necronomicon's banishing passage. Freddy is blinked out of our existence. Jason is crushed by a car and sinks to the bottom of Crystal Lake. And Ash and Carrie drive away into the night. We come to a close with the Book of the Dead resting atop the ice. Its pages opened up to some very interesting imagery. The ending of Freddy vs. Jason, the movie, left room for debate when it came to a winner. See, I think it's pretty clear that you called Jason the winner, because when everything died down, Jason's up and walking around. Freddy has no body. His head was cut off. But Freddy winks at the camera. Look, there's room for argument. Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash leaves no doubt. Ash Williams is the winner. Freddy was banished to the Deadite realm. Jason sunk to the bottom of the ocean. Ash Williams drives away with the babe and hits one of his key catchphrases. Come on, are we playing here? I always respect a versus movie that has the balls to give us a clear winner. And while this isn't a movie, you know what I mean. A versus scenario of any kind. Whatever. Could Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash, as a movie, have lived up to the level of the first installment? Honestly, yeah, I think it would've. I'm using my imagination here and reading in Bruce Campbell's voice, but the dialogue is so well done that I can hear it perfectly in my head. Same with Robert Englund when it comes to Freddy's writing. The gore is absolutely top shelf, the comedy is on point, and this book doesn't overstay its welcome. This entire story was told across just 6 issues and comes in at just 133 pages. You can read it in a single sitting with no trouble. I'm one of those people that truly loves the insanity of Freddy vs. Jason as a movie, so my expectations were high for this book, and I must admit, Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash exceeded those expectations. The only unfortunate part for horror fans who want to own it is the whole out-of-print thing. This book is extremely expensive these days, and now that I've covered it, it's for sale. I'm serious. Hit me up in the comments if you're interested. The question remains though, is it really over? I mean, Jason's been drowned in the lake 25 times at this point. Freddy's come back from worse too, right? Well, I've got news for you. Freddy vs. Jason vs. Ash 2, The Nightmare Warriors, is sitting right here, just begging to be reviewed on Scream Sequence. Thank you very much for joining me here today. Until next time, I love ya, and I will see you soon. The pantheon of horror, like anything else, is subjective. There's no science to it. Legacy and impact hit different people in different ways. But if you stop a random person on the street and ask who the icons of the genre are, I'd imagine you'd be getting a ton of repeat answers. Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, Freddy Krueger. A real OG might hit you with Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, so on and so forth. There are no right or wrong answers when it comes to opinion, you know? Any of these names could easily be etched into the Mount Rushmore of the macabre without much argument. But there's one name we didn't mention, one legend whose resume actually stands taller than he does.
Hi, I'm Chucky, and I'm your friend to the end. Heidi-ho.
You stupid bitch, you filthy slut!
Chucky, the once innocent and, well, inanimate good guy doll, infused with the soul of a serial killer on the night of his death, hit the big screen for the first time in 1988. Yeah, if you haven't checked your watch in a while, dude's been hanging and strangling for 35 years now. Feel old yet? With 8 feature films, that includes the 2019 reboot, an ongoing television show, merchandise for miles, and plenty more to speak of, Child's Play most likely blew away even the greatest of expectations for its lasting legacy. Here today, though, we're going to dial it in. We're going to focus solely on the original, and we're going to dive deep, like we always do here on 616 Entertainment. Welcome to the very first episode of Scream Sequence, razor-sharp reviews of your favorite creepy classics. I'd first like to ask you all, and you can respond in the comments if you like, were you afraid of Chucky when you were younger? Hell, are you still afraid of him now? As a child, I was scared to death of Michael Jackson in the Thriller video. I could not handle the Colossus from Jason and the Argonauts. But Chucky? Chucky didn't do it for me. He scared the hell out of my older brother, who I can clearly recall hiding behind the couch in our living room back in the 90s when Child's Play was on TV, but no, Chucky never had me running for cover. Maybe it was his small stature. There weren't many movie killers that I was taller than back when I was a little kid, you know? I always felt like that if he were coming after me, I could just punt him down the hallway without a second thought. So no, he never scared me. But he did make me punch one of my friends in the face as hard as I could. No, that's not a joke. And no, I'm not going to tell you that story right now. We'll circle back to it at the end of this video. How's that for a hook? Let's talk about where Chucky and the Child's Play name came from before we get into the nuts and bolts of the story and all that. How about it? Our bloody little good guy is far from the originator of the killer doll thing, after all. And nobody will tell you that quicker than Don Mancini, Chucky's creator. Talkie Tina from the Living Doll episode of The Twilight Zone, the Dollhouse Murders, even the Cabbage Patch Kids. They all played their part in birthing what would eventually become the most infamous IP in the genre's history. And yes, I just threw the real-world children's play toy, the Cabbage Patch Kids, in with fictional murderers, and for good reason. According to Don Mancini himself, the commercial craze over these dumb dolls played a huge part in Chucky's inception. And when I say commercial craze, I mean it. In 1983, the demand for Cabbage Patch dolls was so out of control, there were riots. People were trampled. There were reports of customers who were turned away, attacking people who made a purchase with baseball bats in order to secure a doll of their own, by hook or by crook. When we take a look at the world of Child's Play, it's easy to see. The good guy dolls have a television show. The dolls are impossible to find despite their exorbitant price. There are tool kits and accessory packs to accompany the dolls. It's insane. It's Cabbage Patch Kids. Now, I kinda went real hard on the inspiration for the character before I talked much about the writer and creator, didn't I? Let's correct that. Don Mancini was born in 1963. His father was an advertising executive, meaning that product-powered crazes, similar to that of the Cabbage Patch toy line, were front and center in his life from an early age. The first film in Mancini's body of work was 1988's Cellar Dweller, but you won't find his name anywhere in the credits, as he wrote the script under the pen name Kit Dubois. Cellar Dweller is a strange movie with some really cool practical effects, but we can't get bogged down on this right now. Maybe that's another conversation for another time. Probably not. That very same year, Child's Play would hit the big screen, but Don Mancini would not be the only name under the writer's credits. More on that later. Let's get into the storyline before we find ourselves talking about any other unrelated nonsense. If you've seen Child's Play before, enjoy the ride. I'm not going to hit you with a scene-by-scene breakdown, but I am going to cover all the important bases of the story. Now, if you've never seen the film, what have you been doing with your life exactly? On a freezing cold winter's night in Chicago, Illinois, Detective Mike Norris finds himself engaged in a pulse-pounding pursuit with Charles Lee Ray, the Lakeshore Strangler. Eddie Caputo, the killer's accomplice and getaway driver, panics and disappears into the night. With nowhere to go and reckoning hot on his trail, Charles Lee Ray attempts to hide in a toy store, only to be fatally shot by Detective Norris. Unwilling to let go, even in death, Ray swears revenge on both Caputo and Norris by any means necessary. He calls upon the Grigri, an ancient, soul-transferring voodoo spell, but with no suitors in sight, the killer is forced to get creative. The skies darken and lightning strikes, blowing the toy store to smithereens. When the smoke clears, Charles Lee Ray's corpse is found in the rubble. Little do the police know, it's just a shell, an empty vessel. The Lakeshore Strangler's soul lives on. Down the street, 6-year-old Andy Barclay wakes his mom up with an awful but thoughtful breakfast in bed. It's Andy's birthday, and he's definitely buttering his mom up in hopes that he gets a good guy doll. Karen Barclay is a single mom. She works hard, but times are tough. She's barely able to afford a used good guy from a grimy peddler in a back alley. Where do you think this guy got this doll from? Remember when I said Karen works hard to make ends meet? On her son's birthday, she's forced to work a double shift. She spends her break going home to deliver her little boy his surprise gift, his very own good guy doll. Karen's friend Maggie steps in as babysitter, and then she falls out the goddamn window. Of course, we know, as the viewer, she didn't just fall out the window. Chucky killed her. He wanted to watch the 9 o'clock news to find out where Eddie Caputo is, what's the deal with the crime scene where he died, and Maggie shut the TV off and put the boys to bed. That's a no-go for Chucky, so he hit her in the head with a hammer and that's all she wrote. It's super creepy watching the doll's mannerisms before he's fully out in the open, you know? His eyes turning to the TV, the way he pauses to remember his canned lines in order to not blow his secret. Karen comes home to a crime scene, which is never good, and in short order, we're getting going here. How did the footprints get on the counter? How did Maggie fall out the window? Why is this 6-year-old saying that his doll is telling him these horrible things?
He said that Maggie was a real bitch and got what she deserved.
Upon Chucky's request, Andy skips school the next day, trekking all the way into the city through the darkest parts of town to an abandoned, crumbling little house on the outskirts of Chicago. Why? Because this was the hideout Charles Lee Ray shared with good old Eddie Caputo, the man who left him behind.
Don't leave me, God, no!
How do things go for Eddie? Real quick, if it looks like that house is blowing up for real, it's because it is. This property was condemned in real life anyway, so when the studio asked for permission to detonate it for a scene, the city straight up said, yeah dude, go for it. That's awesome. You know what's not awesome? Andy getting picked up at the scene of the explosion, still saying that his involvement with all these things is due to the requests made by his doll. This is where things get super real, super fast. Karen Barclay pleads with her son to tell the truth, because now the state is threatening to take him away. It's a heartbreaker, and Catherine Hicks acts her ass off here. What's even worse is Andy turning to Chucky and pleading with him to tell the truth. A doctor decides Andy's got to stay behind for some tests, and Karen heads home with the doll. Obviously, anybody would be a little loopy in this situation, right? The stress of it all would be impossible to handle. Karen interrogates the doll for a second, and when it spews out a canned line,
Hi, I like to be hugged.
she snaps out of it. What was she thinking, right? The doll? Come on, let's be rational. And then the batteries fall out of the box and it all comes apart at the seams.
I'm gonna throw you in the fire!
You stupid bitch, you filthy slut!
46 minutes into the film, this is the first time we're seeing the real Chucky out in the open. After locking onto Karen's arm like Ace Steel on a September night, Chucky disappears into the darkness of the city streets. We gotta pause here for 1 second. Look, I have said for years that the most unrealistic part of Child's Play is not a doll coming to life. I've said for years that the most unrealistic part of Child's Play is not a soul-transporting voodoo curse. The undisputed, single most unrealistic part of Child's Play is the fact that a toy from the 80s came with batteries included. I don't think so. Look, I was born a couple years later in 1990. I was there. This never happened. The batteries were never in the box. I've been saying this for so long that I was actually able to go back and dig up an old tweet from like 10 years ago. I guess I was pretty proud of this joke even back then, huh? Karen tracks down Detective Norris and explains what happened, and he still doesn't buy it. Why would he? Nobody would. He grabs Charles Lee Ray's file to do some digging and, uh-oh, here's Chucky! Hey, Charles Lee Ray swore revenge on Eddie Caputo and Detective Norris, and Eddie already went Caputo yesterday, so this is the final loose end. A struggle ensues, and jeez-a-loo, the knife shooting up through the car seat right next to the detective's beanbag is enough to make anybody squirm. Detective Norris actor Chris Sarandon actually said that this scene was a nightmare to film, taking upwards of 75 takes to get all of the timing and doll's movements down the right way. The car flips, and in the aftermath, Norris shoots a charging Chucky in the chest at point-blank range, only for the doll to once again escape into the city streets. Chucky didn't get away unscathed, though. Somehow, some way, his plastic form is now producing blood. He's feeling pain. Chucky tracks down the voodoo priest who taught him the soul spell, demanding a way out. And that's when he learns that he's turning human. The longer he stays inside this doll, the more human he'll become. And the only way to escape this form is to enact the spell once again. But it will only work on the first person he exposed his secret to, Andy Barclay. It's worth noting that the voodoo priest didn't know who Charles Lee Ray truly was when he acted as his teacher. He didn't know he was educating a serial killer on the dark arts. He even tries to refuse to tell Chucky how to get out of the doll, but we all saw how that went for him.
Broken leg?
I won't tell him.
Yeah? So long, John.
Poor bastard. Chucky's on the prowl of Andy. Karen and Detective Norris arrive at the Voodoo Man's house just in time to learn how to kill the doll.
It's the only way through the heart.
And here we go. These specific scenes here, where Chucky is climbing the stairs or when he hops on the bed, this is not an animatronic. This is not a puppet. This is an actor. This is Ed Gale, to be exact. And no, he's not actually the size of a Chucky doll. Ed Gale, in real life, is 3 feet 4 inches tall. In order to make him look this tiny, the crew built furniture to scale and shot scenes using forced perspectives. Kinda crazy, right? Super impressive stuff. Anyway, a doctor stops Andy from escaping and Chucky cooks him with shock treatment equipment. Oh boy. In the big finale, Andy races home with Chucky hot on his heels. After a knockout shot, the doll attempts the soul spell, only to be interrupted by Karen and Detective Norris. Body slams, stabbings, baseball bats, gunshots. Dude, this fight is out of control. Chucky can go with the best of them. He'll take all you've got and keep on coming. Light him on fire. Go ahead. That'll do the trick, right? Wrong. This shot here with the smoldering, melted doll lurching after Andy is immortal. This is the most haunting shot of the entire movie, maybe of the entire franchise. Blow his head off, he's still coming. Blast his limbs away, you can't stop him. Chucky is going to get you. When it finally seems like the soul of Charles Lee Ray has met its end, Detective Norris's partner shows up and bounces the head around like a basketball, unable to comprehend what he's just been told. But it's still not over. Through the heart. That's what the Voodoo Man said. Through the heart. And with one final gunshot, the lights go out. And with that, Child's Play ends. There's no cliffhanger. The severed, burned head doesn't start screaming. It doesn't wink right before we fade to black. The severed limbs don't come to life in an evidence locker. Andy looks back through the crack in the door. Freeze frame. Credits. That's it. I mentioned earlier that I was never really afraid of Chucky, and that might be because I always kind of imagined I could fight back against him in a way that I couldn't against a Michael Myers or a Jason Voorhees. But Chucky's persistence really is something to think about. Sure, if he's coming after you, you can get him away for a second. But good luck actually stopping him, you know? That is kind of scary to think about. And speaking of scary, that's a nice transition, right? You would not believe what a nightmare it was just writing this film and getting it ready to roll cameras. Child's Play was directed by Tom Holland. Not that one. Yeah, that one. Holland would not only take the director's chair, but a writing credit as well. You know, I mentioned earlier we'd get back to the writing issues? Here we go. Mancini's initial script had nothing to do with a serial killer's soul being voodooed into a doll, nor was it called Child's Play. The first draft was titled Batteries Not Included, which was dropped. I wonder why. The second name, Bloody Buddy, made a lot more sense when you take a look at Mancini's first go at it. Bloody Buddy was a fictional toy doll in this universe that, when smashed around, would leak fake blood. And that might sound far-fetched, but we have dolls in real life that pee, so Is it really all that weird? In the Bloody Buddy days, little Andy Barclay would mix his own blood with that of the doll, bringing it to life somehow, and then it would go on to terrorize Andy's mother, basically living out the child's evil thoughts. Tom Holland thought this was a bit much. How could audiences possibly side with this little angry kid who practically implants these terrible thoughts and ideas into the doll's mind? Holland cooked up Charles Lee Ray, a serial killer who also went by the nickname the Lakeshore Strangler. The character's name is a reference to 3 real-world murderers, believe it or not. With multiple snags and issues popping up and halting the production of the film, Tom Holland actually exited the role of director to move on to other things. He was a busy man, after all, having directed Fright Night, Psycho 2, and other films before signing on for Child's Play. In Holland's absence, John Lafia would step in, reworking the stitched-together drafts of both prior scribes into something tighter and hopefully more cohesive. Lafia took the Charles Lee Ray character and connected him to the doll by having Ray fried in the electric chair. While he was being cooked, a bolt of lightning would strike, causing the killer's soul to be thrown into the factory where the good guy dolls were produced. You get the picture. And hey, just in case you thought things weren't complicated enough, Tom Holland would wind up coming back to finish the writing and would indeed serve as Child's Play's director when it was all said and done. The lightning bolt was out, the voodoo curse was in, and only now was Child's Play ready to roll. Maybe the only thing more ridiculous than a doll coming to life and murdering human beings is the process around writing this film in the first place, right? Goodness gracious. Even to this day, it's not exactly clear which of the 3 writers came up with certain aspects of the story, but that's their business. We're not going to dive too deep into those dirty details. We will instead jump into some very cool behind-the-scenes information and some little-known tidbits that you may or may not be privy to. As a lifelong Chicago native myself, it's cool to see familiar sights in this movie. Child's Play was really filmed on location in Illinois, too, unlike Halloween, which claims to be set in Illinois, even though we can see palm trees in the neighborhood. Yeah, we don't have those here. I'm not sure the cast and crew really knew what they were signing up for with the Chicago winters, though, as temperatures dipped as low as 40 degrees below zero during the shoot. If that sounds insane, it is. And around here, it turns out insane is pretty normal. I found in my research that neither Brad Dourif nor Chris Sarandon auditioned for their roles as Charles Lee Ray and Detective Norris. Director Tom Holland had prior experience with the actors on Fatal Beauty and Fright Night and simply handpicked them. I love it. Brad Dourif, in my mind, is one of the most underrated, most underappreciated actors of our time. Very few performers can give me goosebumps with their voice alone, and he's at the top of that list. Something about the rage that he can tap into with his performances, man. One of the greats. And not for nothing, let's show some love to Chris Sarandon. This man provided the voice for the star character of my favorite movie of all time. Danny Elfman sang Jack Skellington's songs, but all of Jack's spoken lines are indeed performed by Chris Sarandon. Again, I love it. Child's Play brings people together, right? I mean that literally. Karen Barclay actress Catherine Hicks met her husband, Chucky's designer, Kevin Yeager, on this project. How's that for a story at a dinner party? It practically took an entire party of people to bring the damn doll to life, too. Portrayals of Chucky change scene by scene. When it's not Ed Gale in a suit, we're looking at an animatronic model being puppeteered by a team of 9 talented people. Someone's on the eyes, someone else on the mouth, another on the head turning. It's out of control. And you've got to factor in how many dolls there were, too. Obviously, the first moving, living, revealed Chucky we see is not the same doll that's being used by the end of the film. This is not a mistake. It's not an oversight. As Chucky turns human, he takes on more human features. His hairline begins to recede. His rounded, shiny features transform into sharper, harsher expressions. Oh, it's so good. On a budget of just $9 million, Child's Play pulled in over $44 million at the box office, immediately establishing the diminutive slasher as the king of the killer dolls. You might not expect it, but Child's Play even reviewed well. Critics normally bury horror movies, for whatever reason. But read it and weep, nerds! Chucky's big debut fared well. Child's Play 2 would hit the big screen in 1990, with Child's Play 3 following in 1991, and the rest is history. And though Chucky's reputation has fluctuated between go away and hell yeah, it's Chucky multiple times in that span, the fact remains, Chucky is the king of the killer dolls. I mentioned at the top that I was never afraid of Chucky, but he did make me punch one of my friends in the face as hard as I could. That's a true story, and I promised that we'd come back to it, so here we go. It was a sleepover. It was my old buddy Brian's birthday party. What do kids do at sleepovers once the parents are out for the night? We do things we're not supposed to do. In this case, we watched Child's Play. We were all 9, 10 years old, old enough to not scream and cry from a horror film, but young enough to not want to be caught in the dark while watching one. I have a vivid memory of my good buddy Bathroom Money Tim Ewers flipping the lights off and sprinting down the hallway back into the living room because he did not want to be caught in that dark, unfamiliar place. And we've all been there, right? Long story short, after the movie, we're all being knuckleheads. We're running around the house. We wind up in the office or the computer room or whatever it was. And that's when I make eye contact with Brian's sister's Furby. Do you guys remember Furbies? I picked up the Furby and I'm like, oh, I got this genius bit. I started pretending that the Furby was pulling a Chucky. That's when Mike, another buddy at this party, inserted himself into the bit. And by that, I mean he ran over and shoulder-checked me into the wall super hard for no reason. He picked up the Furby and started doing the Chucky bit with it. I did not appreciate being slammed into the wall like that, and I don't know what came over me, but I stood up, I turned Mike around to face me, and I punched him in the temple as hard as I could without a second thought. He went down. He screamed bloody murder and cried down the hallway to wake Brian's mom up. It was a terrible, terrible scene. I'm not sure why I hit him so hard. Even in fistfights with my brother when we were kids, we would still punch each other in the body. We'd punch each other in the arms. This was the hardest I'd ever punched somebody in the face. And the next day, I thought I was going to get in huge trouble, and I didn't at all. My mom showed up to pick me up. I saw her talking to the other moms, and I was like, oh, great, here we go. And when I walk up to my mom, she goes, see, I thought you were going to fight with Sean. What? First of all, I had no problem with Sean. Second, it's not important. It's a weird story. It's a very weird story, but it's true. Mike, if you're out there, I hope you're doing well, and Brian and Sean, too. I hope all of you guys are good. I lost contact with all these guys over the years, as you do as you get older. Mike and I were back to being friends like 3 days later, by the way. Kids do dumb things. He apologized for slamming me into the wall. I apologized for punching him. We moved on. Sometimes I wonder if I'm the only one who still thinks about that night. Maybe. Maybe not. I can't be sure. The only thing I can be sure about is how Mike and I justified hitting each other. We both agreed. It was fairly obvious. Chucky made us do it. When the skies are dark enough and the fog is thick enough, you say it. You can't help yourself. It's almost like you don't even think about it. The line is coming out of your mouth before you've even processed the fact that this is probably the 200th time you verbalized this exact sentence. But try and tell me I'm lying. Open the door, walk outside, and this is what you see.
Looks like Silent Hill out here.
Add another tally to the list. I'll never stop saying it. I don't think I could if I tried. But that's the power of a truly special piece of art. In 1999, video game developer Konami trekked into the world of survival horror, which, at the time, was absolutely dominated by Capcom's Resident Evil franchise. Jill Valentine, Leon Kennedy, zombies, Raccoon City, the T-Virus, they were all the rage. They were synonymous with the genre. Hell, they were the very foundation the genre's mansion was built upon. How could Konami's Silent Hill possibly compete in a market that was already cornered by a single IP? Well, it's actually pretty simple, and today, I'll tell you all about it. Now, before we begin, I do want to give a shout out to today's sponsor, Raiders Shadow Icons, who I'm just kidding. I don't have any sponsors. You guys are the sponsor over on patreon.com/616entertainment. And for that, I thank you kindly. Now let's quit screwing around and let's dive deep into Silent Hill. I feel like one of the quickest ways to fail when jumping into an already cornered market is to enter with the wrong strategy. I'm gonna pull a quote here that wrestling fans will enjoy, as it comes from one of the most major players that industry has ever seen. Former WCW president Eric Bischoff, when asked about his game plan regarding competing with the WWF, stated that there are 3 ways to approach such a feat. You can strive to be better than the competition, worse than the competition, or different than the competition. Nobody wants to be worse than, right? And you're not going to jump into the world of professional wrestling and be better than the WWF in the early 90s, nor are you going to knock on the survival horror door and kick Resident Evil's ass, which makes better than a fool's errand. This leaves us with different than. In the mid-90s, the World Wrestling Federation was hokey, it was cartoony, it was silly. So Eric Bischoff opted to go for a more grounded, realistic approach with his company, creating the NWO. It was different than the competition, and it worked. With Silent Hill, Konami didn't eye up Capcom's franchise and go, hey, you know, I think we could do cooler zombies than Resident Evil. Hey, you know what? I bet we could have more guns, bigger guns. With Silent Hill, Konami didn't go for zombies at all. They didn't beef up the player with super soldier characteristics who can carry 14 rocket launchers and a shoulder cannon like we're the Predator or something. Our character is a normal guy. He's as regular dad as it gets. We're not a fighter. There are no zombies or tyrants. In their place are whatever the hell these things are. Ghoul children with knives, flying skinless meat pterodactyls, giggling ghost babies who only move when you turn your flashlight off. It's unsettling. Resident Evil featured intense gore and monsters that would not only chase you, but they were faster than you in some cases, and they would mutilate you in seconds if they closed the distance. Silent Hill scares aren't based in the threat of brutal violence. They're more mysterious in nature. I know what a hunter is, and I know I don't want it to chop my head off with one swipe. But here, I don't know what's going on. I don't know where I am. I don't know what these sounds are. I don't know how I got here. I don't know. That's it. It's the fear of the unknown. It's one of the greatest tricks in the book, and when used as nicely as it is here, it's a chef's kiss. Silent Hill's infiltration of the survival horror genre greatly succeeded, in my opinion, by being different than. Now, WCW's version of different than led them to the top of their industry for a period of time. Was Silent Hill's different than ever doubling as better than over Resident Evil? I mean, sales figures and whatnot are out there, but if we're just talking about preference, that's an opinion-based thing, and that's not the argument we're here to have today. It's not really an argument I ever want to have, if I'm being honest with you. I would much rather dive deep into the facts. I would rather dive deep into where Silent Hill came from, the inspirations behind its creation, and all that good stuff. The blank page can be daunting, but you've got to start somewhere, right? With Silent Hill, Konami stared at the blank page with the baseline of wanting to appeal to an American audience. Konami is a Japanese game developer, if you were unaware. They're the home of Castlevania, the old-school Ninja Turtles games many of us grew up with, Contra, Metal Gear, and I'm just gonna draw the line there. Don't hit me with a, you forgot this franchise. No, I didn't forget. I just can't name literally everything they've done. Tasked with writing and directing this horror-themed, American-style project would be industry veteran Keiichiro Toyama, who had previously worked on titles like the Hideo Kojima-designed Snatcher, as well as International Track and Field. That's already a hell of a genre jump, right? Toyama would eventually go on to create the Siren and Gravity Rush franchises as well, earning him one hell of a resume. Seriously, raise a glass, this dude is a legend of our time. But Legends run into problems in production just like anybody else. And there were multiple periods where Konami stepped in to check on Team Silent, the in-house developer operating under Konami's umbrella, and nearly pulled the plug on the entire endeavor. What's funny is that one of the reasons the suits looked at the in-progress project and were left wondering what was happening was because the major players at Team Silent had practically gone rogue. As time went on, Team Silent were less and less interested in the initial American-style order they were given, and instead opted to create something that they, and hopefully others, would see as a masterpiece. This was Keiichiro Toyama's first time as a writer-director, and man, he pushed the "what exactly can I get away with" meter to the absolute limit. I could have spoken all about the lighting effects and audio design in that section of the video, but I don't want to. At this point, I really want to jump into the game itself. Silent Hill isn't just a cacophony of spooky things being thrown at the screen. There's indeed a gripping story twisting all of these bizarre threads into one horrifying tapestry. From a top-down perspective, Silent Hill is the story of a man trekking into the unknown in search of his missing daughter. That's the elevator pitch. That's the one-sentence overview. But we're not here for the elevator pitch. This is Scream sequence. We're here to dissect this thing. So here we go. Right from the jump, the music stabs you in the heart. This is one of the most legendary theme songs in the history of the medium, man. I wish I could play the whole thing for you, but you know how it is with copyrights and all that. The music sets the tone so perfectly because it doesn't sound like anything you've ever heard before, especially in 1999. We'll broaden our horizons a bit for a second. Think of some other great theme songs that set the tone of their game. All of these, excellent. They offer a glimpse of what's to come. Silent Hill's theme song is instantly unsettling. It's practically confusing. It's alarming. And guess what? That's how it perfectly sets the tone. You see, Harry Mason, our main character, isn't just walking down the friendly streets of his local neighborhood on the hunt for his adopted daughter Cheryl. He doesn't know where he is. The night before, Harry and Cheryl were heading out on vacation when a strange child walked into the middle of the road, causing Harry to swerve and lose control. And this is where he woke up, with Cheryl missing. This town, Silent Hill, clearly has something terribly wrong with it. A thick, blinding fog blankets everything as far as the eye can see, which is not very far thanks to the fog. That was a bad joke. Looking for help? Tough luck, as there's not a single living soul to be found, though there are monsters patrolling the streets. Seeking refuge from the dangers outside, Harry stumbles into a diner where he encounters Sybil Bennett, a police officer investigating some strange activity in the town. Sybil is one of the very few other characters in this entire game. In the church, we meet Dahlia Gillespie, a woman seemingly out of her mind. Over at the hospital, there's Dr. Michael Kaufman, and finally, Lisa Garland, a nurse who is just as confused as we are. And why wouldn't she be confused? She's experiencing the same thing. She's watching the world phase back and forth between two completely different states of being. Look, when we enter the hospital, all is well. It's foggy and empty and a bit chilling, sure, but it's just a hospital. Until it isn't. We're looking for Cheryl. We're fighting through the haze. We'll tear this entire town apart to find our daughter if we have to. First floor, she's not here. She's not down in the basement, so we get the elevator running and we check the second floor. No dice. Third floor, it's locked down. There's no way. So we pop back into the elevator and... Fourth floor? There is no fourth floor to this hospital. There certainly wasn't a fourth floor button a few seconds ago. but we'll take anything we can get. We have to find Cheryl, so we press the button. We hallucinate a strange vision of that child who was in the middle of the road wandering into an antique shop, and the door opens. And this floor bears no resemblance to the others. Take the stairs down to peek around a little bit and, okay, maybe our mind is playing tricks on us, right? We must have lost track of what we were doing. Let's head back to the elevator. There is no elevator up there. There is no 4th floor. The very stairway we just took down here seconds prior is now walled off. Silent Hill's environments flashing back and forth between the light and dark worlds means you never know what's coming next. Finding a handwritten note from Cheryl telling us to come find her in the school seems like a beacon of hope, right? Entering the school offers the impression that there may be a light at the end of this awful tunnel, but unfortunately, that light may as well be from an oncoming train, as this school is overflowing with what appear to be knife-wielding, ghoulish, rotting children. And if you're wondering, wait, can I fight back against these children? Yes, you can. Yes, that's the type of game we're dealing with here. Look, Harry Mason may be a normal dad. He might be a guy who was completely unarmed before he ran into a cop who handed him a gun in order to protect himself. But when the chips are down, we are not helpless. It's funny, too, that the Harry Mason archetype would go on to be further popularized in games like Dead Space, where Isaac Clarke is not a soldier. He's not a member of STAR's Bravo team. He's an engineer who has a bunch of dangerous tools that he can use to protect himself. But I'm getting off track. Back to Silent Hill. There are more layers to this bizarre, twisted, rotten, barbed wire covered onion. Silent Hill beats you over the head with nothing. There are no characters to explain in great detail what the hell is happening. When Harry asks Sybil what she thinks the Dark World is all about, she tells him straight up, I have no idea what you're talking about. Harry encounters Lisa exclusively in the Dark World, and while she's not sure what's happening, she at least has some insight into the town itself, which apparently used to be inhabited by mostly older, stranger cultists. Cultists with a flavor for the unknown, most notably black magic. Dahlia Gillespie, that weird old woman we met in the church, is one of these cultists. I mean, the weird pyramid-shaped object she gave us, her insistence that she knows where to go, of course she's involved in something crazy. I often feel like I spend too much time relaying story to you guys in great detail, but here, I couldn't if I wanted to. I don't know who clicked on this expecting me to be this Silent Hill expert, but I'm not. And I'm also not a liar. That's why I can honestly tell you, here and now, I think this game is completely incoherent. Gameplay-wise, towards the end, we wind up in a place with no map, where opening a door can take us from the first floor of the hospital to the second floor of the school. The teleporting door is not specifically marked at all, meaning that as we have to go back and forth, you better just remember which door that was. If Toyama was trying to pull some sort of stunt here where the player goes mad, just like the characters do, no thanks. It's not fun to play this final part, sorry. It's just not. And story-wise, it's not any better. We find an altar with a photo of a little girl named Alessa, who kinda looks like Cheryl. Fast forward through a ton of puzzle solving, and Dahlia reveals that she is Alessa's mother. That years ago, Alessa was terribly burned and has been kept alive, living a fate worse than death, and acting as a vessel for a demon that she will give birth to, making Alessa the mother of God upon return to paradise. Are you following this? Neither am I. Depending on which ending you get, there are 5 of them, and we'll talk about that later. You'll fight one of 2 final bosses. Either Incubus, the demon spawned from Alessa, or the Incubator, the godly woman person thing in front of us. Dr. Coffin might already be dead if you didn't save him earlier in the game. Again, different endings. Lisa does die after, I guess, realizing that she's already dead or something. Guys, I'm telling you, I have no idea what the hell this game is about. But yeah, I blasted the Incubus demon out of the sky, an adult Alessa appeared, gave me a baby, Sybil and I ran out of the nowhere. somehow. And that's the story of Silent Hill. Strange? Yes. Bizarre? Absolutely. Now, is there extensive lore out there that can explain some of this to you in great detail? Yes, I've seen some of it. How they pieced all of that together, I have no idea. I read something about Dahlia put a curse out there that forced Cheryl subconsciously to get Harry to take them on vacation to the town so they would spring the trap. Okay. How about this? I have no idea where Cheryl is at the end of the game. After the final boss fight, Alessa's grown up. She hands Harry a baby. Is the baby Cheryl? If so, why is Cheryl a baby now? I have no idea. I have absolutely no idea, and I am convinced that unless you have that extensive lore or unless you're reading a guide, this game is just incoherent. Keiichiro Toyama wasn't trying to write Superman the movie, where the hero captures the villain, turns him over to authorities, and it's all wrapped up with a nice little bow. No. This story is a little less Richard Donner and a little more David Lynch. I mean, let's be real. Silent Hill is a lot more David Lynch. Not only in its peculiarity, not only in its uncanny and bizarre camera angles that could make a fighter pilot slightly dizzy, but in its music. Silent Hill's composer, Akira Yamaoka, took major inspiration from Angelo Badalamenti, the composer of David Lynch's Twin Peaks series. I mean, just listen to some of these tracks side by side. Badalamenti's work on Twin Peaks was a major piece of Silent Hill's compositional puzzle, but these tracks weren't the only gears turning in Yamaoka's mechanical mind. Italian rock band Goblin famously provided the soundtrack for legendary horror director Dario Argento's 1977 film Suspiria. And I'll kiss half a man's ass if the inspiration from said soundtrack isn't clear as day. David Lynch's previously mentioned Twin Peaks series is famous for many reasons, and its use of the unusual, its inclusion of the uncanny, stands tall. I think it's pretty clear that Silent Hill, at times, was going for this exact feel. There's a movie-style sort of gag reel after the game's credits, which serve as fake credits, acting as though the characters are actors, and that we, as the camera, have caught them off guard, or in between takes. Like I mentioned earlier, Keiichiro Toyama played around with the insanity dial himself on Silent Hill in many ways, chief amongst which might be including 5 different endings to the game. Which ending the player receives depends on how they handled specific situations, whether they completed optional side quests. Even something as small as finding and combining certain items can play a huge part in your finale. I won't spoil all of them, but I'll throw the most insane one out here for you to enjoy. There's a very specific set of instructions you have to follow to get this to work, but if you pull it off, there you go. Aliens. Literal aliens from outer space blast Harry in the stomach with a laser gun and take him away. The end. Now, this is silly for sure, and no, this is not canon in any way, but yeah, there you go. The alien ending. What's funny is that even though it's dumb, even though a whole flock of aliens comes down and Harry meets them and just says, "Hey, have you seen my daughter?" instead of running for cover, I still found this scary as a kid. Yeah, I haven't done a lot of talking about myself or my personal experiences with Silent Hill, and that's because, like several other topics I've covered along the way, I experienced Silent Hill mostly over the shoulder of my good buddy Bathroom Buddy Tim Ewers. And if you frequent this channel and you're like, you talk about this guy all the time, of course I do! We hung out every day! We shared all of these stories together, and I remember the night he pulled off the UFO ending. Just the image of the ship in the sky was enough to get under my skin. But then seeing the later images, where it's not a lone ship, but a group, no thanks. No thanks, I don't like that. And look, I say I don't like that, but obviously I'm kidding around. I do like that. I respect anything that can really mess me up. I appreciate it deeply. But there are things about Silent Hill that I legit don't like. I put over the bizarre camera angles earlier that look like they're pulled straight out of Jacob's Ladder, but sometimes this game's camera sucks. Is it cool that the camera is at our back when we enter a door, but then in front of us when we exit? Yeah, I guess. It's unique. But I can't see where I'm going. Sometimes there's an enemy in front of me and I have no idea where they are. I learned through a guide that holding L2 will sometimes recenter the camera behind Harry, but A, it doesn't always work, and B, the game never tells you that. Again, I read it in a guide I pulled up when I was stuck. And stuck, man, oh my god, let's talk about getting stuck. This game is not friendly to newcomers. At all. I'm telling you, I just played through it. All of the gameplay you're seeing is my personally captured gameplay. This game is insane if you've never played it, or if, like me, it has been years and years and years since you've played it. This is where some of you Silent Hill diehards might get a little mad at me, but hear me out and really listen before you jump down my throat. Parts of this game are ridiculous. I understand that you've played through it 20 times. You've got it memorized, but I don't. And reading this poem about different birds and being faced with a piano without any clue as to how they correlate is just terrible design. Oh, each bird corresponds to a key. Okay, dude, fine. How the hell do I know that? How do I know which order to press the keys and play the notes in? Not all of the puzzles are difficult. There's a sculpture of a hand holding something. I've got a corrosive liquid in my inventory. That should probably melt the hand, right? Sure, that was simple enough. But being on the roof, running water through a pipe to try and get to an out-of-reach key, only for the water to drain in the wrong spot, so then I have to use this rubber ball I found to plug the hole so that the water flows to the correct spot. It does. The key is washed down a pipe. Where did it go? I don't know! The game does nothing to tell you where that key went. Do the pipes drain into the basement? No. I mean, why would they? I don't know, I'm not a pipes guy. Ain't no pipes. I'll cut to the solution. The key is sitting outside of the entrance of the courtyard in the very corner, hidden behind the door and the bush in this precise location. Duh. Of course it is, right? Come on. This one isn't even worth going into at length. It's that out of control. But this astrologically themed puzzle is absolutely the most obtuse, unexplained, horrible puzzle I've ever encountered in a video game. No, I did not figure it out. I looked up a guide, and I guarantee you did too. And don't you dare, actually, I didn't use a guide. Me in the comments, I don't believe you. Let's just save us both some time. Let's turn the tables now. Look, it's perfectly fine and even fair to spotlight the negatives in a retrospective. I'm not here to show you a Silent Hill commercial. I'm here to cover the game retroactively, the positives, the negatives, everywhere in between. If I'm giving you the feeling that I don't like this game, that's not the case. I respect Silent Hill a great deal, and now I want to talk about some of my favorite parts. Our radio alerts us to the presence of monsters in our general vicinity, and our flashlight illuminates our path. These tools help us find our way and keep ourselves ready to fight when violence is called for, but their function is twofold, a double-edged sword, as it were. The monsters are drawn to the light, and they can 100% hear the sound of the static. Your strategy is your call, but I'm leaving the light and radio on, thanks. Even as a kid, I appreciated the degradation of the dark world, especially when it reaches the streets of the town itself. It's one thing to see the hospital or the school switch over, their interiors taking on an industrial, mechanical aesthetic. But to be walking down what's supposed to be a road, but there's no asphalt to speak of. Instead, we're walking across these steel grates, torn apart with an endless, woeful abyss underneath. That is terrifying. What I love specifically is that it doesn't make any sense. There's nothing below us. Nobody built these grates. This entire area shouldn't be. But it is. When the world has no rules to adhere to, only then are there truly limitless possibilities. There's no description of what or who these ghoul children are. A gigantic moth boss. Okay, how did this insect grow to such gargantuan size? Where is it from? You're never gonna know. What is this? This animal-man hybrid thing? You'll never know. I also just love the sounds of the gun in this game. Can I shine a light on that? Many games in this era, hell, even today, use stock sounds. You'll hear the same gunshots in games from the 90s that you hear today. It's easy. It's a money saver. I'm not an expert, I could be wrong, but I've never heard any of Silent Hill's gunfire sound effects in another game. They've always felt so specific to me, and that's something I really appreciate. And one more, I kind of glossed over it earlier because trying to make sense of it is absolutely impossible. But the scene where Lisa realizes why she's experiencing this fear and this suffering, and blood pours from her every orifice, she reaches out to Harry for help, and Harry has no idea what to do, so he leaves the room and barricades the door behind him while Lisa screams from the other side. This is messed up. This is, in my opinion, the most powerful part of the game's story. Reading the diary she leaves behind reveals that Lisa was forced to care for the cursed, burned, tortured Alessa. And she's also addicted to the weird mystery drug that Dr. Kaufman is dealing through the town. In my ending, Lisa emerged from the ground and pulled Kaufman into the depths of the nowhere. Don't ask me about the drug, what it did, who was buying it, or why Lisa needed it. I have no idea, but that all happened, and it was pretty cool. Silent Hill hit store shelves on January 31st, 1999, exclusively on the Sony PlayStation, joining the survival horror genre's heaviest hitters. Resident Evil, Clock Tower, Dino Crisis, Parasite Eve, and more may have beaten Konami's debuting IP to release, but much like the game's uncontrollable, cursed, dual world, Silent Hill could not be denied, selling more than 2 million copies at retail. Across the following 24 years, Silent Hill would expand ever outward, with myriad sequels and spin-offs, all of varying degrees of quality, as well as 2 live-action, theatrically released films. After an extended period of silence, a period diehards feared may be the end of the series, Konami has recently announced plans for Silent Hill to continue forth. Not with a lone game, no, but like 5 games, all announced at the same time. And another movie. One of the games is a remake. Not of Silent Hill, no way, silly, it's a remake of Silent Hill 2. I don't know what to expect from all this, to be honest. With an assortment of less than stellar offerings in the catalog, I do wish Konami would simply focus on creating something truly special, but they appear to be throwing everything at the wall and hoping something sticks. Whether something does or not remains to be seen, but what we know for sure is this. 1999's Silent Hill, where it all began, is immortal, etched forever into the annals of not only survival horror history, but gaming history. And this is where I get to share something really, really cool with you guys. If you were unaware, Silent Hill on the PS1 is very valuable nowadays. A complete copy, not a sealed copy, just a complete copy. Case, disc, manual, that's gonna run you about $200 these days. Over the last several years, ever since I did the history of Resident Evil, really, I've been getting hundreds of comments saying you should do the history of Silent Hill. You should do retrospectives on Silent Hill. There were 2 problems with that. Number 1, I don't know Silent Hill nearly as well as I know Resident Evil. And number 2, I don't own the Silent Hill games. That's where Mr. Beef comes in. Now, is that a hilarious name? Yes. But Mr. Beef is a Patreon supporter of mine, has been for a long time, and he hit me with a DM over on the Discord ski. And he sent me this DM saying, hey, I've heard you talking about Silent Hill. I heard you say you want to cover Silent Hill. I have Silent Hill. Let me send it to you. And I responded back to Mr. Beef and I said, absolutely not. Silent Hill is a very valuable game. If you want to get rid of it, put it on eBay. Make some money. Don't give that away. What are you nuts? Mr. Beef insisted if I don't take it, it's just going to sit in a box in his attic and collect dust. And so I messaged him back and I was like, I guess I would be an asshole if I turned you down. All right, go ahead. You can send it. I'll you know what? I'll do something with it. That's how I'll justify me accepting this from you. So Mr. Beef doesn't just send me Silent Hill. I opened the box and it also contains Fear Effect and Silent Hill 2. Mr. Beef, you're out of your mind. And if you guys watching this episode, if you enjoyed this video, tip of the cap to Mr. Beef. He made this possible. If you'd like to see a scream sequence on Silent Hill 2, that's now possible thanks to Mr. Beef. Video game movies come with a certain level of expectation, right? For the longest time, if a video game was being adapted for the big screen, we all kinda knew what to expect. And by that I mean we had a feeling it wasn't gonna be what we hoped for or imagined. 1993's Super Mario Bros. Barely resembles the games it was based on. Mario actor Bob Hoskins had no idea the film he was working on was a video game at all. 1994's Double Dragon and Street Fighter films are, the less said the better. In 1995, Mortal Kombat's silver screen debut proved to be a campy, over-the-top, awesome adventure, but it sorely lacked the violence its digital original was known for. We knew for years that somehow, some way, a movie based on our favorite video game would wind up falling either just short of expectations or straight off a cliff. Nobody had totally stuck the landing just yet. And that's why in 2002, when I found out that Resident Evil, my favorite video game of all time, was being adapted into a movie, I was ecstatic. When you're a kid, it's different. You don't remember the weird, bad stuff. You hold on to the cool things you love for dear life. There's no way a Resident Evil movie could fall short, right? Zombies, Umbrella, The Mansion, Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, Barry Burton, Wesker, the Tyrant. My mind raced with fantasies of what it all might look like. And then the movie came out and almost nothing I just mentioned appears anywhere in the film. It has been over 20 years since Resident Evil released, and today we're going to take an earnest look at the movie's development, its final form, its lasting legacy, and more. It's time for another Scream Sequence Retrospective. Now, right at the top, I don't want you to think that this video is going to be burying this film for its entire runtime, nor do I want you to expect me to gush about how much I love it. I'm going to deliver the facts right down the middle, and when I'm speaking from a place of opinion, you'll know it. We'll cover the good and the bad on this episode, and trust me, there's a bit of both to go around. Now, without further ado, let's get to it. I feel like it's important to have somebody who gives a damn about the source material to be in charge if you're looking at crafting a worthwhile adaptation. That's common sense, right? When it comes to Resident Evil, the source material was oozing with film-worthy elements. Don't believe me? Just ask Paul W.S. Anderson, the man who landed the role of writer and director on this picture. Anderson wasn't only familiar with the source material, he hadn't just heard of the franchise in passing, no, he was a huge fan. After playing both the 1996 original and its 1998 sequel, Resident Evil 2, Anderson actually wrote a script for a film entitled Undead, which he has fully admitted was a straight rip-off of Capcom's survival horror video game series. You want somebody who respects the source material, how about that, right? Dude liked it enough to write a movie about it without even having the license. It's worth pointing out that this wasn't Anderson's first experience with combining video games and film, as if you were unaware, we're talking about the very same guy who directed the 1995 live-action Mortal Kombat movie. A movie that was a smash hit, by the way. It was this very fact that landed him in front of the suits when Resident Evil's film adaptation was being shopped around. Hey, who did Mortal Kombat? Let's talk to that guy. They brought him in, he showed them his Undead script, and the bigwigs loved it. Anderson was told to rework his unofficial, knockoff Resident Evil movie into the real deal. But what would this film look like? Are we talking about the mansion, the police station, the hospital, chimera, hunters, and tyrants? No, we're not. But before we go further into what was, let's make a quick pit stop into what could have been. We've established Paul W.S. Anderson as writer-director. Cool, got it. The what if comes into play with film legends like Alan B. McElroy and George A. Romero. If you frequent this channel and have a sense of deja vu right now at the mention of that first name, that's because you watch the history of Halloween. Alan B. McElroy wrote Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, an entry widely considered to be one of the better offerings in that entire franchise. According to quotes from those close to the situation, McElroy's Resident Evil script was very, very close to the first game. Complete with enemies like the giant spiders, it would have starred Jill Valentine and Chris Redfield, and apparently it was horrifically violent. Film producer Robert Kolzer stated that McElroy's script was so similar to the original game that the further entries like Resident Evil 2 and 3 would have made the film feel dated in comparison. Okay. The legendary George A. Romero, most famous for genre-defining classics like Night of the Living Dead, Dawn of the Dead, and more, was also attached as a writer in the early goings. Resident Evil's film rights were picked up all the way back in 1997, by the way. So this project went through many shapes and iterations before Paul W.S. Anderson was finally chosen as the man for the job. But yeah, even Romero had a go at it. And by that I mean he had nearly half a dozen goes at it, reworking script after script to try and find something true to the franchise that the studio were also interested in funding. Romero's work is actually out there. You can Google it, you can find it, you can read it. His version was also set to be extremely violent, something the final film is not in any way. Ultimately, the work of both McElroy and Romero would be passed on. Unlike Romero's draft, McElroy's script, at least in my research, appears to be lost to time. I'm sure someone has it. I'm sure it could see the light of day if it were released, but it doesn't seem to be widely available at this point in time. Now let's talk about the cast, and by that I don't just mean the actresses and actors portraying these characters, I mean the characters themselves. Look, when my friends and I were young and we were in our infancy of experiencing the internet, I don't think we were out of line for expecting this movie to star Jill and Barry and Chris and Wesker, maybe even Leon or Claire, right? But that's not what happened. Not even close. Our star here in Resident Evil is the talented, the beautiful, the badass Milla Jovovich. Now, if you've never heard anything about these movies and you see this image, you're not out of line to be thinking, dude, great casting for Jill Valentine. Milla Jovovich is not playing Jill Valentine. Jill isn't in the movie. Milla Jovovich is playing Alice, a woman with amnesia who doesn't know what's going on. Eric Mabius is not Chris or Wesker or Barry. He's Matt Addison. And let's head it off right there. None of the characters from the games are in this movie. Resident Evil's big film debut is not HBO's The Last of Us, where they're taking the video game and recreating it, fleshing it out even further. Resident Evil is the type of adaptation where it's using the same title, but it's not the same thing. And I find that interesting because of how big a fan Paul W.S. Anderson is of the franchise. He specifically mentioned wanting to create a movie that fans of the game would enjoy. But then you've got the production designer saying,
we wanted to create something new. You know, if people want to see something new, if they've played the game, they want to go to a different place now.
These two different mindsets seem to directly conflict with each other, but hey, what do I know? I mentioned that the characters from the games are not present in the movie, but what about the monsters? In the interest of time, we will do this quickly. Zombies? Yes. Hunters? No. Dogs? Yes. Chimera? No. The Tyrant? No. Neptune? No. Big ol' spiders? No. Now, if we're just talking about the zombies and the Cerberus dogs, who's going to be the big bad here? Which monster will step into the role of boss? Well, we are going to have to step outside of the original Resident Evil to answer that question. One of the best, scariest, most memorable parts of 1998's Resident Evil 2 is the first encounter with the Licker. The exposed brain and skeletal structure, the razor-sharp tongue, the clicking of its gargantuan claws on the cold tile floor. Come on. And there you go. There's your answer. The Licker is no longer a mid-level enemy. We're not going to see Alice dealing with a dozen of these guys across the duration of the film. This is the boss. And while we're talking about the Licker, I just want to throw out how great it looks. And it looks this good because it's not all CGI. Some shots are computer generated, sure, but this is predominantly a guy in a suit. And when it's not a guy in a suit, it's an animatronic, puppeteered by a talented team of professionals. You know me, I'm a practical effects guy, and I'll always put this over to the moon. Now honestly, the movie doesn't always do the best job of showing the practical effects off, but we'll dive deeper into that later. I totally forgot to write about this, and that's why the audio quality is different, don't worry about it, but can we talk about the Cerberus dog in this movie? The reason it doesn't look like CGI is because it's not. That's a Doberman, that's a good boy, covered in makeup from tail to tip of his nose. They did an excellent job with him. They didn't abuse this guy, and his performance is top of the line. Oscar winner. Goddamn, this is really cool. And now that we're pretty deep into this video, why don't we tell the story of the movie? I always go back and forth on this, you know? Should I tell the story first? Should I open with development and production details? I can never make up my mind. I guess it doesn't matter as long as you guys are having fun, so let me know in the comments. Are you having fun? I can't just wait around for your answer now. I'll go through the comments later. Let's tell the story of this movie. The opening scene of Resident Evil goes hard, man. We've got some top secret stuff going on in a high security laboratory, which is already invoking images of the video game on our minds. But this isn't a routine job, as the man in charge turns and chucks a vial of something horrific to the ground. Before long, the entire facility goes into lockdown, and hundreds of employees panic. What's going on? Why are the sprinklers going off? There's no fire. Why are the doors locked? Things go from bad to worse very quickly. Elevators are plummeting. A fatal gas is released, killing literally everyone exposed to it in seconds. Obviously, whatever was in that vial was dangerous enough that somebody has declared it worthy of complete extermination. The last remaining workers, who were trapped inside an elevator and away from that horrible gas, attempt to break free. Guess how this turns out? Elsewhere, a beautiful naked woman wakes up with no idea who she is, where she is, or what's going on. This is Alice. She seems to be involved in this whole deal somehow, but to what degree is anybody's guess. Who the hell's that guy in the photo? What's with the high-tech gun cabinets and codes? Who the hell is this guy here? Forget all that because the place is stormed by some sort of task force. And now we know Alice is deeply involved, as this guy, known as One, requests a mission report. Jesus, secret doors, undercover hot women, they're heading into a secret underground facility below a mansion, an Umbrella Corporation railway system. This is Resident Evil through and through, man. Let's go. One and Rain, the awesome Michelle Rodriguez plays Rain, lead the charge underground to investigate the issue that killed so many people. The man from the photograph falls out of a damn locker, and now we're cooking. We got mysteries on mysteries here. In short order, we're clued into the fact that the gas release and the sprinklers drowning people, this was not a malfunction. This was the work of the Red Queen, a self-aware, sentient security system. So, step 1 on the task force to-do list, shut down the Red Queen. She's unstable, she's dangerous, and she'll get in the way of the investigation. Easier said than done, though. I mean, look at all the bodies. The final stop before the hive, which is where the Red Queen lies, is right through this hallway. But this is no ordinary hallway. The doors close and lock the team inside. Lasers beam through the corridor. There's a decapitation, clean cut. Homie lost his fingers. Ouch, cut in half. It's down to one, the leader of the team. Dude, you can't stop him. You can't keep him down. Well, there goes that. Time out, time out. I interrupt the telling of this movie's story to just say, this part is awesome. Dicing a dude into a million little pieces in a diagonal diamond pattern, it doesn't get much cooler than that. Kaplan steps up. The mission must be completed, and the Red Queen is shut down. But not before she cuts a sick promo.
You're all going to die down here.
With the Red Queen disabled, all is well, right? No, no, no. Disabling the lockdown opened all of the doors. And do you know what those doors were doing? They were containing the bodies of the employees. The bodies that are now up and walking around. Remember that vial that broke in the beginning? That vial was filled to the brim with the T-virus, a volatile, unfinished product that aimed to extend life, perhaps even create everlasting life. But again, it's unfinished. And in this state, in this dangerous, incomplete form, that's not what the T-virus does. The T-virus, having spread through the building, has reanimated the corpses strewn about the halls. And now it's our hero's problem. Rain, thinking she has found a survivor, is taken by surprise when the woman bites into her flesh. This woman no-sells 3 gunshots to the leg before... This is where the shit hits the fan, and the team are surrounded by zombies. Gunshots are not taking them out. Fire isn't taking them out. Their sheer numbers are overwhelming, and not everyone makes it out alive. Alice, separated from the group, battles a bloodthirsty pack of infected dogs. Matt reunites with his sister who died in the lockdown, and the reunion does not go the way you'd like it to. Matt spills the beans to Alice that this corporation, Umbrella, were conducting highly illegal studies down here. I mean, no shit, right? And that his sister was going to attempt to leak it from the inside to a top secret contact. It's worth noting that Umbrella's employees did not know that they worked for a corrupt, murderous company. Matt's sister dug deep, and upon discovery of what she found, was going to blow the lid off the place. Not all of these people who died down here were in on it, and bad people. Don't get it twisted. With the smoking gun against Umbrella, the investigation is complete, and the goal has changed. Now, escaping is the priority. Rain takes another bite in the sewers, this time from the zombified corpse of her own partner. Heartbreaking stuff. With Rain's condition worsening, Alice and Spence's memory slowly recovering, and the walls closing in, there's a breakthrough. There's a cure for the T-virus. A cure that Spence knows all too well, as he's revealed to be the man who caused the outbreak in the first place. Spence was going to sell the T-virus and the cure to the highest bidder on the black market before things went way worse, way quicker than he thought they would. With his memory regained, he offers Alice a chance to get away with him, which she turns down, disgusted by the man he's become.
I'm missing you already.
Spence gets bit, but he knows where the cure is. It's on the exit train. He'll be fine, right? No, sir. Having ingested living, infected flesh, the liquor mutates. But now with the cure in sight and the doomsday countdown nearing its end, it's time to get moving. Rain, Alice, Matt, and Kaplan avoid the liquor and board the train, but not before Alice comes face to face with the corpse of Spence.
I'm missing you already.
Rain and Kaplan are injected with the cure, the train rushes the heroes to safety, but oh no. Some days you just can't get rid of a liquor. Kaplan is killed by the monster, the cure fails, and Rain turns, forcing Matt to put her down for good. After a lengthy battle, the liquor is killed in a fiery explosion, dragged across the tracks at over 100 miles per hour. After finally reaching the surface and escaping this horrible nightmare, Matt's wound from the liquor begins to mutate. An entire biohazard team breaks into the mansion. They steal Matt away and drop a very ominous line.
I want him in the Nemesis program.
And Alice is subdued. Sometime later, she awakens in the Raccoon City Hospital, stuck with more needles than a pincushion. She'd been monitored in this room for God knows how long, and who knows what Umbrella did to her in that span of time. She breaks loose and finds that not only is the hospital empty, but so are the city streets. The T-virus made its way into the public, and now it's the apocalypse. But just like her experience in the underground lab, Alice won't take this lying down. And that is Resident Evil. Look, at the end when those Biohazard boys said Nemesis Project, I was ecstatic. I couldn't wait. Dude, they're gonna do Nemesis in the sequel? Are you kidding me? Oh my god, I was over the moon. Now, was the Resident Evil movie everything I hoped for as a kid? I mean, this was my favorite video game of all time. It still is, as a matter of fact. So did it live up to the hype? Did it deliver everything I wanted? No, not even close, really. But does that mean I hate this movie? Also, no. Honestly, and this is just my opinion here, I think Resident Evil is pretty good. That opening scene with the elevator spot is awesome. The laser hallway, the liquor, Mila Jovovich in a soaking wet mini dress with a gun. Come on, what's not to love? And don't call me weird. She said that herself.
To see me in a wet mini dress and a gun, I mean, come on. What more can you ask for from Resident Evil?
But for real, I do want to focus on some of the best parts of this film. I know, some of you have heard that these Resident Evil movies are terrible. And sometimes that's true. Some of these are very, very bad, but I don't think the original falls into that category at all. Now, I've gone into detail several times about my disappointment level in the game not being followed. That is, as far as the characters and the deep closet of monsters are concerned. But listen, there are a ton of direct references to the game. Don't believe me? Let's take a look. Tell me the train escape is not pulled straight from Resident Evil 2, with the liquor in place of William Birkin. The initial battle with the zombies, where the first one takes several shots and Kaplan says, that was a clean hit. Again, straight from Resident Evil 2.
What's up with that guy? That was a clean hit.
Main menu of the first game, shot of Alice at the end. We've even got a self-destruct sequence countdown. The newspaper in the final scene. Look at the text. Anything look familiar? I'm telling you, the movie is loaded with little nods like this. I applauded the liquor's practical effects earlier, but how about these settings, man? This isn't green screen-a-palooza, Dan-Dans. These are real places. Resident Evil was filmed predominantly in Berlin. This is a real train station. These are real sewers. Say whatever you want about aspects of this film falling short, but don't let me catch you burying these backdrops, because they're awesome across the board. And speaking of practical effects and not copping out and going the easy route, when this zombie springs to life in the room filled with water, this is the real deal. This isn't CGI or a puppet. This actress was weighted down to a platform 9 feet underwater. She was trained to use scuba gear, and this shot is 100% authentic. As are many of the fight scenes. You might notice a lack of convenient cuts to hide the actors' faces. It's because they didn't have to hide anything. Many of the actors underwent military training and performed some of their own stunts. I can't play it for you now, but the film was scored by the combination of Marco Beltrami and Marilyn Manson. Yeah, the guy who composed the music for Scream, tag teaming with the guy who gave us Tourniquet and The Beautiful People. What a combination. And now with some of the coolest parts, the deepest cuts, and impressive notes covered, I do want to turn the tables a little bit. Like I said, I don't dislike this movie. There are some parts that are very cool, but it's not all great. It would be dishonest of me to not cover the fact that the zombies don't look good. For the most part, I mean. There are a few that look very good, but those are pretty few and far between. CGI is used sparingly on the zombies, but when it's there, it's bad. It stands out like a sore thumb. Most of the zombies barely look dead. Some of them have a little tiny scrape or a scuff. My first real look at this movie came from a video game magazine I picked up while waiting for my mom at a grocery store, and even in the still shots at 11 years old, I was like, this looks kind of lame. I'd make a joke here about how the makeup team must have been underpaid and refused to do a great job in protest, but that's definitely not the case. In the special features on the DVD, we get a look at some of the zombie makeup camera tests. When lit well and given room to breathe, we can see that some of these designs are excellent. But in the movie, in motion, most of them are terrible. I feel like the color grading and overall visual aesthetic may have taken a toll on the makeup. It just doesn't translate in motion. And let's talk about the level of violence here, which is extremely lackluster. Resident Evil is like Mortal Kombat, right? Both franchises are known for violence and gore. As a matter of fact, the first time I'd ever seen the word gore was this very screen right here. So where is the gore in the Resident Evil movie? There's not a lot of blood here at all, to the point that this movie could have almost passed as PG-13 if it wasn't for Mila showing full frontal Jovovich. The elevator decapitation is done off camera. The disemboweling, decapitation, and dicing of the task force is largely done off camera as well. Spence being mauled by the liquor is either off camera, or when we do see it, the liquor is in the way of the action. Even when zombies are shot, there's almost no color at all. The movie goes out of its way to explain that the blood in the zombies is coagulated, which, in a thicker, more solidified state, I suppose it wouldn't spray around as much. But don't do that! I want it to spray! I want it all over the place! This is Resident Evil! Paul W.S. Anderson's Mortal Kombat and Resident Evil movies are both sorely lacking in violence. And for that, I guess I'm slightly upset with him. I don't know. It's also a bummer that one dies so early. We don't get to see him do what he's really capable of. It reminds me of that one Simpsons episode where Homer is dying to see what the little mysterious guy is going to pull off.
But Marge, that little guy hasn't done anything yet.
If I've got one more complaint, I feel like the liquor isn't shown off as well as it could have been. I didn't even really know how much effort was put into the practical effects before I started working on this video, because you never really get a great look at all the hard work. Though I do appreciate Mila Jovovich pointing out on set that the stunt tongue from the liquor is not accurate to the design of the game.
It's too big. Like razor sharp points, but like skinny and like a little whip.
She's the best, man. Resident Evil hit theaters here in the States on March 15th, 2002. On a budget of a little over $30 million, the film would go on to gross over $103 million worldwide. The reception from fans was mixed. I'm one of those fans, you know? I have likes and dislikes. The reception from critics was terrible, pretty much across the board. The film was panned. Like I said, this was a different era. An era where video game movies were largely disregarded. It's funny to me that director Paul W.S. Anderson pushed a modern style throughout the film's production. Modern, modern, modern. The reason it's funny to me is because now, over 20 years later, the film is anything but modern. And I realize that's how time works. Styles and looks and everything will change, but I'm not coming at this negatively. I'm saying it's a plus. That's the charm of this 2002 film in 2023. Nothing looks like this anymore. Nothing made today has this feel. Nothing made today has music like Marco Beltrami and Marilyn Manson's score behind it. Nobody is shooting in a sewer crawling on pipes. Nobody's in a real emptied out train station. They're on green screens. I don't know, man. Resident Evil may not have been the aggressively violent, Chris and Jill-led, morbid mansion movie I initially envisioned, but for what it is, it's pretty damn cool. Zombie film legend George A. Romero may not have landed the film, but he did direct a TV commercial for the game Resident Evil 2 that aired in Japan. Again, what could have been, right? We know what this film series would go on to be. There would be 6 of these damn things, but hey, maybe those are another conversation for another time. At the end of the day, Resident Evil is not the best video game movie ever made. That's for certain. But it's definitely not the worst either. And if you've never seen this one, or maybe it's been a while since you've popped it in, I say give it a chance.
To see me in a wet mini dress and a gun, I mean, come on. What more can you ask for from Resident Evil?
What have you got to lose? Castlevania is one of the most famous video game franchises of all time. From vampire to vampire killers, from daring heroes to horrifying monsters, from 8 bits to 16 and everywhere in between, this series has been sending chills down our spines for nearly 40 years. When somebody mentions Dracula, 3 distinct images immediately pop into my brain. Bela Lugosi, Christopher Lee, and Castlevania. That's some pretty elite company to be in, if I do say so myself. On today's episode of Scream Sequence, I'm going to sink my teeth into the original Castlevania trilogy. That's the first 3 entries in the series, spanning from 1986 to 1990, all exclusive to the Nintendo Entertainment System. This franchise is not only home to some of the earliest memories of my entire life, but is, in large part, responsible for this channel existing in the first place. I can't wait to tell you these stories. Oh, what's up, Dan-Dans? My name is Ian. Welcome to another episode of Scream Sequence, razor-sharp reviews of your favorite creepy classics. It is not hyperbole in any way, shape, or form to say that this type of video, my in-depth retrospectives that you guys like so much, I would not be making videos like this were it not for Castlevania, and I'll tell you why right here at the top. Now, this is going to be a personal part about me and my work, and if you want to skip ahead to the coverage of the game, feel free to do so. You're going to miss a ton of important context and laying of the groundwork, but I know how attention spans are these days. Do whatever you want. One of my favorite entertainers in the entire world is James Rolfe, better known online as the Angry Video Game Nerd. I've been watching James for more than a decade. His AVGN reviews are not only hilarious, I've not only learned a ton from him over the years regarding the video games at hand, but my entire workflow on my retrospectives comes from Angry Video Game Nerd episode 102, where he detailed how he makes an episode of his show. He laid out the steps of playing the game and taking notes, turning those notes into a script, recording voiceovers, and I was listening. Everything I do on this channel is self-taught. I've never taken a video editing class. I've never taken an audio editing class. Look, James once called the fantastic 2002 documentary American Movie his filmmaking Bible. Well, AVGN episode 102 is mine. Why am I telling you all this about the Angry Video Game Nerd? Well, his 4-part 2009 series, Castlevania, How I Remember It, is my favorite piece of content he's ever created. It may be my favorite set of videos on the entire internet. I've watched them 100 times, and long before I made retrospectives of my own, I dreamed of one day doing a multi-part retrospective on something that I loved as much as James loves Castlevania. For more than 10 years, this channel garnered around 10 to 30 views per video. In 2017, I finally got to writing. I finally pulled the trigger on attempting to make my own multi-part retrospective. And that first retrospective was the history of SmackDown. When part 1 drew over 700 views, I couldn't believe it. That was massive for me. I kept working, I kept getting better, and in 2018, I released the history of Mortal Kombat. These 2 series alone have pulled in a combined 7 million plus views for my channel, and have become the cornerstone of what I do for a living. I get comments every day that my history of videos on Halloween, or God of War, or Resident Evil, people fall asleep to them. They put them on while they're at work, they throw them on while they're cleaning the house, and I respond to as many comments as I can, but nothing can really put into words how much that means to me. My videos, for several of you out there, are exactly what James' Castlevania series was and still is for me, which is unbelievable. I've been asked many times over the years to cover Castlevania in depth, and I always say I never could because I'd be too influenced by those AVGN episodes. I would never forgive myself if I accidentally, subconsciously pulled one of his lines as my own, or if my work was too similar in the end to his. But you know what? That's bogus. I'm my own man, I'm my own artist, I work in my own style, and it would be goofy to not give Castlevania my best. Now, am I as good at these games as James is? Hell no. Do I know as much about these games as James does? No. I did a ton of research to accompany my personal stories and my personal opinions, and we'll get to that in just a second. But damn it to hell, I do love these games, and when it comes to playing them, I try my best. So now the stage is set. You know how important Castlevania is to me personally and professionally. So without further ado, let's get to it. One of my favorite things to do in videos like this is to start off covering the origins of the topic at hand. I love to celebrate the writer, the director, the creator of the game or movie I'm talking about. And this is only one area where Castlevania is instantly unlike anything else I've ever covered here on the channel. Many of you may know that back in the day, back in the 80s, the video game industry was very different. There were major concerns amongst studios that their talent may be stolen away by a competitor. So Konami, the publisher of all the Castlevania titles, did not allow the developers of the game to take credit for their work. Trans Fishers did not direct the original Castlevania, nor did Bram Stoker write it, nor did Christopher B. star as Dracula. These names, which are obviously humorous odes to many of the greats of the horror genre, are here in place of the actual developers of the game. Konami were very canny back in the day, not only in protecting their investment in these talented designers, but in circumventing Nintendo's production protocol as well. After the video game crash of the Atari 2600 era, Nintendo avoided the market being flooded by trash with the rule that every publisher, even the best and brightest, were allowed to release just 5 games per year. All NES cartridges were produced by Nintendo themselves, each granted the official Nintendo seal of quality. Konami, the hard-working and successful publisher and developer they were, said, "That doesn't work for me, brother." What do Metal Gear, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Skate or Die, Gyrus, and more have in common? They're all Konami games. The logo on the box says Ultra Games, and guess what? Ultra Games was Konami's shell company they created literally just to get around the 5 games per year rule. I don't like the developers not being allowed to take credit for their work, but I do love the creation of Ultra Games. That's good stuff. When it comes to who really created Castlevania, who put in their blood, sweat, and tears on this project, it's been almost 40 years and we still don't have a concrete, complete rundown. We do know that this entire trilogy we're covering here today was written and directed by Hitoshi Akamatsu, but even he is a pretty big question mark. Mr. Akamatsu directed Castlevania, Castlevania 2, and Castlevania 3. That's a hell of a resume. He must have gone on to create other, bigger, better games after this, right? Not really. Shortly after the North American release of Castlevania 3, Dracula's Curse in 1990, he retired from the video game industry altogether and has been a complete ghost ever since. I'm serious. No one can find him. What you're looking at is the only known photograph of Hitoshi Akamatsu in existence. There are members of the Castlevania fanbase that wonder if Hitoshi Akamatsu ever even existed. They wonder if the very name itself is another secretive pseudonym, which I doubt. Man, what a miserable little pile of secrets. Let's dive into the story and gameplay. You know, these days, we've got the lore. We've got the history of all these games spelled out in great detail, but back in the early 90s, when my brother and I had an NES and we owned Castlevania, we didn't know we were playing as Simon Belmont. We didn't know that Simon's weapon, his whip, was called the Vampire Killer. We didn't know anything that wasn't printed on the back of the box or in the instruction manual. And spoilers, none of those deep, fleshed out details of the lore you can find online are anywhere to be found on either of the things I just mentioned. Plus, I was playing Castlevania before I could even read. I was born in 1990. We got an NES when I was probably 3 years old. This box could have said Dracula is a bad man with sharp teeth and he'll steal your candy if you don't clean your room, and I wouldn't have known the difference anyway. I can recall things I did take note of, though. Castlevania always felt like a special kind of adventure to me. Now, at that age, obviously I wouldn't have been able to find these words, but what I was noticing back then was how cinematic this game is. And I'm not talking about the bosses, which are pulled straight from the classic Universal monster movies. I'm talking about the camera panning from room to room. I'm talking about seeing Dracula's castle in the background as we approach it. I'm talking about the moon growing exponentially in size as we progress to our end goal. The castle crumbling after the final battle is one of the earliest examples of cutscenes in a video game. And I mean, come on, look at the main menu. The top and bottom of the screen, we're looking at a strip of film. Now that's a little background on the game's creation, or it's as much information as I can find about the game's creation on the internet. I've got more Castlevania stories to tell, I've got more deep dive in Castlevania details to share, but before we dive into any of that, I do want to shine a light on the gameplay itself. The Vampire Killer, as it's known today, or the Magic Whip, as the instruction booklet calls it, is our main weapon. We can upgrade it by grabbing power-ups, making the whip longer and more dangerous. Throwable sub-weapons are also hidden in the environment. Daggers, axes, holy water, the cross, boomerang. Some say each weapon has a specific use case. The holy water is the best weapon in the game for my money, and the dagger sucks. I would pretty much rather have nothing than to have the dagger. When we're badly hurt, we need to find some meat, as it's the only way to replenish our health. There are no kitchens or refrigerators to be found, though. No. The meat is hidden in the bricks that make up the walls. Don't ask questions, just eat it. I love the little hidden secrets in this game. Check it out. Break this block on stage 2 and kneel at the bottom of the screen. Break the blocks on stage 4 and stand inside the wall. Neither of these items do much other than improve your score, which is largely pointless, but I grab them on every playthrough. It doesn't feel complete unless I get them.
Also, I didn't even write about this. This is just my natural behavior from the gameplay I captured. I love jumping in front of the HUD. I love jumping in front of the scoreboard up there. I can't stop doing it. Awesome little tricks from back in the day, right? No meat there.
Across Castlevania's 18 stages, we're faced with half a dozen big boss fights. The Mummy Men, as they're called, may not be one-to-one recreations of Lon Chaney Jr.'s Karis, but it's damn close. The Frankenstein and Igor boss doesn't even need to be explained, does it? That is straight up Boris Karloff's rendition of the Frankenstein monster. In Death, we've got our classic Grim Reaper, and oh boy, let me tell you, if you're not fully equipped with an upgraded whip, tons of hearts, and a sub-weapon, you're not going to win this fight. Yes, I know that there are really talented speedrunners out there, and even normal players out there, who can do this with just the whip, but I certainly can't. Just getting into the position where I could spam him with the holy water took me forever. And that's the thing, Castlevania is a hard game. Very hard. I've been playing it for 30 years, and I still hit brick walls where I'm like, yeah, this is just not gonna happen today. There's a timer counting down on each level, but it'll never run out. You'll fall in a pit or have your health bar drained 1,000 times on your trek to Dracula, but the timer, it may as well not even be there, which is nice. Timers can be very stressful, and we've got enough stressing us already in a game this difficult, so I'll take any little victory I can get. Some of you hardcores out there might be wondering if I'm going to cover Vampire Killer, the similar but different game that was released exclusively in Japan for the MSX2. The short answer to this question is no. I'm not going to be covering it at all. I really don't know anything about Vampire Killer. I've never played it, and I'm not going to stand here and make stuff up. That's not my style. Plus, we've got an entire trilogy to cover here today. Let's not get crazy. At the end of the game, Dracula's head is severed from his body. He explodes, and the curse of man is revealed. Anybody who tells you this fight is easy is a liar. Even with a sound strategy and a fully prepared loadout, it's insanely difficult for me. But when it's all said and done, the evil is vanquished, and we watch the satanic castle crumble to dust. Oh yeah, in Japan, this game isn't called Castlevania. It's called Dracula's Satanic Castle, which is awesome. That name did not fly in the States due to Konami of America's senior vice president, who was not on board with the religious terms and iconography, and so Castlevania was born. One of the coolest little details I learned in my research is that, according to the designers, the gears present in the final levels are powered by Dracula's heartbeat. When Dracula is killed at the end of the game, the castle crumbles, because there's nothing left to keep everything moving. There's nothing to keep it all together. We can bust on 2D side-scrollers from this era all we want regarding floating platforms and staircases to nowhere and all that silly stuff, but I love when there is an actual explanation for what we are seeing. Upon its 1986 Japanese and 1987 American release, Castlevania made a hell of a name for itself. I owned Castlevania, my friends owned Castlevania, it reviewed very well, and as a young kid, to me, it always felt like this game was one of the biggest, most well-known games in the entire NES library. But factually, when it comes to dollars and cents, it wasn't. Not by a long shot. Castlevania doesn't break into the top 75 when it comes to the best-selling NES games of all time. And I don't mean this 1987 debut original, I mean none of the 3 games on the docket today crack into that list, believe it or not. The fact that we're still talking about it today, the fact that these games are still being re-released today despite not setting the sales world on fire, is just a testament to its quality. But I'm getting way ahead of myself here. Let's not jump to present day just yet. Just like Michael Myers, Jason Voorhees, and any other classic horror icon, Dracula's never really dead. In November of 1988 here in the States, it was time for terror once again, in Castlevania II, Simon's Quest. Now what the hell is Simon's Quest exactly? What is our hero setting out to accomplish? Well, this one's a doozy. At the end of the first game, we cut Dracula's head clean off his shoulders. We defeat his gigantic, monstrous form, which explodes. From a design standpoint, Dracula's body parts flying in every direction wasn't just a cool thing to do. It was planting the seeds for the sequel. A curse was placed on Simon after the battle, and to gain his freedom, he must track down all of the severed limbs and lay them to rest in the ruins of the original castle. That is awesome. Back in the late 80s, some developers seemingly loved to completely change the playstyles between entries of certain franchises. One of the most famous cases of this is The Legend of Zelda, a top-down action-adventure game, and its sequel, Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link. Imagine playing the original and then going to the video store and renting Zelda 2, only to pop it in your NES and have no idea what you're looking at. Arguably the second most well-known case of this genre switch is, you guessed it, Castlevania to Castlevania 2. Now these two games don't immediately look different the way Zelda and Zelda 2 do, but the play styles are night and day, and I mean that literally in the case of Simon's Quest. Castlevania 2 now has us purchasing new weapons and upgrades for our existing arsenal, but we're not spending money, we're spending hearts for whatever reason. We're walking around towns populated with other people and having conversations with them. The night and day deal I mentioned earlier comes into play right here. When night falls, the enemies are tougher, townspeople are replaced with zombies, so on and so forth. When I was a kid, I was lucky enough to own both Castlevania and Castlevania 2, but I really don't have any memories of playing Castlevania 2 from when I was that age. And it's probably because it was too hard. It was probably too intimidating for me to figure out. You know, with the original game, it's pretty clear. You turn it on, we gotta get from point A to point B. There are enemies in the way, we gotta kill them, there's going to be a boss fight. It's pretty straightforward. In Castlevania 2, being able to speak to the townspeople and trying to figure out what the hell they're talking about, having multiple paths open to us from the very start and trying to figure out which one we're supposed to go down first, I was probably super overwhelmed. Full disclosure, to this day, I have never beaten Castlevania 2. I've never even come close. And that's not because Castlevania 2 is much harder than the original. It's not that I've tried a million times and failed. I just don't really have a lot of interest in spending a lot of time with this game. It's just not for me. I've never felt bad about being such a noob when it comes to Simon's Quest because, let's face it, the game is designed to be confusing. It's not designed to test your skill or your cunning or your reflexes as much as it's designed to confuse you. I'm serious. You are not going to figure out where to go or what to do in Castlevania 2 without the aid of a guide. Let's not even talk about the crystal that brings a tornado to carry you away, or the crystal that you hold to kneel and drop the screen down, revealing more of a level. Let's cover the townspeople themselves. You depend on these characters to tell you what to do and where to go. And guess what? Many of them will tell you things that are not true. There's been debate for decades whether something was lost in translation, whether this was poor design or whether it was on purpose, but longtime Castlevania veteran Koji Igarashi claims that some of these people were placed here specifically to lie to you. So, thanks for that, I guess. It goes without saying that the music in the Castlevania series, across the board, is top tier. 10 out of 10. But Castlevania 2 specifically, oh my goodness. Several of the greatest songs in video game history come from right here. Kenichi Matsubara composed the music for Simon's Quest, and let me tell you something, Bloody Tears belongs in the Hall of Fame. For the rest of time, Bloody Tears would make appearances in sequel after sequel, establishing itself, in some ways, as the overall theme song of the entire franchise. This second entry is remembered fondly by some, and not so fondly by others. Some people hate this game. The angry video game nerd's entire gimmick kicked off with him trashing this one to pieces. Now, he's made it clear that his hatred for the game is definitely dialed up for the sake of entertainment, of course, but you get the picture. So, just once and for all, how do I personally feel about Castlevania 2? Not a fan. Even today, in my 30s, I gave it another go in preparation for this video, and I still have no idea what to do. I still have no idea where to go. You know, I started in the first town and I trekked all the way somewhere else and I got lost. So I read online. There was a specific merchant that was supposed to be in a specific building and I have to buy a specific item from them. I walked into the building. There's no merchant. So I did a little further reading, and what do I find out? I have to go back to the original town to buy the holy water. It was specifically the holy water. Go all the way back to where I just was, throw the holy water at the wall inside the building where the merchant was supposed to be. That wall will disappear. I can then walk into the wall where there's an entirely different room with the merchant that I thought I was going to find in the first place. How am I supposed to know how to do that? How is anyone supposed to know to do that? Do they expect you to pick the holy water up, keep it equipped, and just throw it at everything you see? I don't think so. I don't think so. Castlevania II Simon's Quest, despite its unique design choices and largely lackluster boss fights, reviewed fairly well. The game sold nearly 1 million units, and even after the final battle, even after the smoke was cleared and Simon Belmont laid Dracula's body to rest, the story was far from over. Dracula's arm bursts out from the grave and, depending on your ending, yes, there are multiple endings, Simon Belmont either lives or dies. I'll never see the different endings myself because I'm not interested in playing all the way through this game, but that's alright. If you're watching this video and you're a fan of Simon's Quest, tell me a story in the comments. Tell me about a great memory you have with this game. I'd love to read it. In between Simon's Quest and the third mainline entry, Haunted Castle would hit arcades. Players would once again take control of Simon Belmont on a death-defying journey to save his wife from Dracula, but we're not here today to focus on Haunted Castle, nor are we going to spend much time on Castlevania The Adventure, which was exclusive to the Game Boy. I will say though, this game rules, and is one of my favorite games on the platform. But I advertised this episode of Scream Sequence as one covering the NES trilogy of Castlevania games, and damn it, it's time for the main event. In September of 1990, that's 2 months before I was born for anyone keeping score, the NES once again played host to another vampiric adventure. Castlevania III, Dracula's Curse, returned the series to its roots, leaving behind the RPG and open world elements of Simon's Quest. But this wasn't a carbon copy of the original, no. There were new innovations in the shape of branching paths and multiple playable characters, making each run feel fresh. The 3 partners we can recruit on the journey are the Sorceress Sypha, the Pirate Grant, and Alucard, the son of Dracula. Each character has their own unique abilities, meaning your choice of who to bring along for the ride can make a gigantic difference. But hold on, I got ahead of myself again. You may wonder what the hell is going on here. It'd be nice if I laid it out for you, right? Well, Castlevania 3 is a prequel, and for the first time we've got an actual story laid out for us in the game. Dracula's been wreaking havoc for eons, the Belmont family were exiled from society over fear of their abilities, and somebody's gotta get this mess under control. Simon Belmont, the star of Castlevania and Castlevania 2, doesn't even exist yet. We're playing as his ancestor, Trevor Belmont. You know, some families are comprised of generations of bakers or accountants or dentists. Other families are vampire hunters. What are you gonna do? You're probably tired of hearing this by now, but I did state earlier that Castlevania 2 is not for me. I'm not a fan of Simon's Quest. But Castlevania 3? Dude, Castlevania 3 is awesome. If you've ever played Simon's Quest and Dracula's Curse back to back, you know what I'm talking about when I say that Castlevania 3 just feels better in every way. The platforming is smoother, the whip feels better, and just going back to the original style of whip upgrades and the classic sub-weapons we can pick up from candles or defeated enemies, this is what I want to be doing when I play Castlevania. The boss fights are drastically improved, and yes, we're taking on the Universal monsters once again in the mummies and Frankenstein, but that's not all. These skeletal knight dudes remind me of Jason and the Argonauts. This big demon boy is just fantastic. The fight with death isn't just a minefield of flying scythes this time. Now he's got a second phase where he takes the form of an enormous freaky-ass face. One boss fight matches us up against a mirror image of ourselves, or whichever character we're playing as. Castlevania 3 is basically the original game just leveled up. Bigger, better, and just awesome. I mean, this is what Castlevania 2 should have been, but hey, what are you gonna do? Dracula's Curse contains arguably the toughest platforming of the entire NES trilogy, but I feel like the difficulty ramps up over time. The first few stages are practically a breeze. You'll feel good. You'll feel like this is just going to be a walk in the park. And then the game reminds you what Castlevania is all about. And let me just be clear with you, I've still never beaten Castlevania 3. I will, someday, but in my 32 years on this planet, I've yet to pull it off. But I don't have to finish it to tell you that, good lord, this game looks incredible. And I'm not alone in thinking that this is one of the best looking offerings on the entire platform. And you know what? It's got one of the best soundtracks on the platform as well. What's really interesting to me is that the Japanese release of Castlevania 3, the soundtrack sounds totally different. And that's because inside the Famicom, which is what the NES was called in Japan, there's a different sound chip. And this sound chip allowed for deeper, richer sounds and music. This video from Kid Gabula beautifully illustrates the difference in sound quality. Both sound great. It's not like the version we got over here is horrible or anything. It's just the Japanese version is deeper and richer. Look, I'm not a musician. I don't want to get deep into the weeds and talking about music and composition because I really don't know what the hell I'm talking about. I would rather spend some time covering the legacy that this game has left behind. The aforementioned Koji Igarashi, the writer and assistant director on many Castlevania titles, most notably Symphony of the Night on the PlayStation, has called Dracula's Curse his favorite in the entire franchise. And I mean, it shows. Iga's own studio, Artplay, which he founded after leaving Konami in 2014, is most well known for Bloodstained Ritual of the Night, a love letter and spiritual successor to Symphony of the Night. Ritual of the Night is awesome, but Bloodstained Curse of the Moon is even better. This 8-bit blast from the past is so inspired by Castlevania 3, it's almost surprising they got away with it. And I'm not complaining. Curse of the Moon is fantastic. So is Curse of the Moon 2, by the way. These games are on every modern console out there, and they're cheap, so don't skip these. If you've seen the Castlevania animated series on Netflix, you might know that this show's storyline is pulled straight from Dracula's Curse. I was just talking about how this game's graphics are some of the best in the entire NES library. Same deal with the soundtrack, but I'm ready to throw down the gauntlet now. Castlevania 3 is one of the best games on the NES, full stop. And once again, I'm not alone in that opinion. In their top 100 NES games of all time list, IGN slots Castlevania at 19, Castlevania 2 at 25, and Castlevania 3 at number 5 of all time. Look at some of the games on the NES, even some of the better known games. How many of them are we still talking about with such reverence today? Not too many. Castlevania has stood the test of time, Dan-Dans. What's funny is that, with as much as I love the original and Dracula's Curse, they're not my favorites in the series. I adore Castlevania Bloodlines on the Sega Genesis, which sold very poorly and is not nearly as well known as the NES games, despite its high quality. Super Castlevania 4 on the SNES is legendary. I did a video review on it over 5 years ago on this channel. It was just the second review I'd ever done. I'll put the link in the description if you want to check it out. And dude, Symphony of the Night on the PlayStation? Forget about it. These are my favorites. These are the Castlevania games that I know best. And if this video does well and you guys want to see me cover those in depth someday, hey, I'd be happy to. After all, Castlevania is where some of my earliest memories come from. Castlevania is partially responsible for me making videos like this and doing what I do for a living. I hope I've done the series proud here today, and if you're a fan of the games, I hope I've done you proud as well. On the first episode of Scream Sequence, I made a big deal out of focusing on one of horror's greatest, most famous icons, Chucky, the diminutive slasher fueled by revenge, a children's toy possessed by the soul of a serial killer. Chucky is without a doubt one of the most well-known characters in the genre, but today we set our sights on one of the first icons of the genre. Hell, he's one of the earliest icons in film history. Frankenstein released in 1931 and changed the world of cinema forever, establishing the character immediately as a mainstay in pop culture for the rest of time, really. And when I say establishing the character, I mean the monster. Frankenstein is the doctor, not the monster. Many of you know that already. The rest of you are like, wait, really? Yeah, I've got a million little pieces of behind-the-scenes, deep-diving, hard-hitting retrospective content for you today. Welcome to another episode of Scream Sequence, razor-sharp reviews of your favorite creepy classics. Oh, what's up, Dan-Dans? My name is Ian, and I hope you are ready to get down and dirty with Frankenstein. Not like that. Or like that. I don't know. Maybe you're into monsters. That's none of my business. My business is patreon.com/616entertainment, and I could really use your support over there in growing this channel. If you're not signed up yet and you enjoy this video, hey, maybe this is the one that sold you, alright? No more talking, no more selling, no more nothing. Let's talk about Frankenstein. Though our focus today is the 1931 Universal film, Frankenstein as a character and premise dates all the way back to an 1818 novel written by Mary Shelley. Frankenstein, or The Modern Prometheus as it was originally titled, chronicles a scientist's journey into the darkness, creating life from death. The novel and the film do not line up 100%. As a matter of fact, the 1931 movie strays heavily from the source material. For instance, when you hear the name Frankenstein, who do you picture in your head? Maybe the doctor, the monster, and Igor, right? The hunchback assistant. Igor doesn't come from the book at all. He was created for the movie. And his name isn't even Igor in the movie. This guy is called Fritz. The name Igor was first used in Son of Frankenstein, which was the third film in the franchise, released in 1935. Mary Shelley's novel is focused on a scientist named Victor Frankenstein, whereas in the film, the scientist's name is Henry Frankenstein. He has a friend named Victor, but this guy is way in the background, and it makes you wonder what the point was of changing the names at all. These are just a few examples of how many layers there are to this beautiful, horrifying cake, and we're just getting started. Getting away from the novel now, let's talk about the film. In the director's chair would be James Whale, whose prior work included 1930s Hell's Angels and Journey's End. Whale was openly and proudly gay, and back in the 1920s and 1930s, that was far from common. And by that I mean, it just didn't really happen. Film historians have poured through Whale's body of work, pointing out many instances of what they perceive to be Whale telling his story as a gay man through his characters, most notably in the Frankenstein series, which is interesting. While Frankenstein was only Whale's fourth film as a director, the man behind the monster was extremely experienced. Beneath all that ghoulish, masterful Jack Pierce makeup is Boris Karloff, acting in his 81st film. Yeah, 81st. At just 44 years old, Karloff had been acting on screen since 1919. Here's a little trivia. Karloff is killed in the original Scarface. Man, he made a ton of enemies over the decades, didn't he? Henry Frankenstein, the scientist who creates the monster, is played by Colin Clive, a talented but tortured man both on screen and off. I personally think it's a shame that Colin Clive isn't as widely and fondly remembered. His acting here is tremendous. There are very few people who can legitimately get me with their eyes alone, and Clive was one of them.
Crazy, am I? We'll see whether I'm crazy or not.
If we can do one thing right here, right now, let's raise a glass to Mr. Colin Clive. I'm trying to give a little bit of a history lesson here without droning on and on to the point that it gets boring or maybe stuff that you've heard a million times before. We will dive deeper into the cast and all of that later, but let's not go any further without first telling the story of this movie. And before we do that, come on, that's better, right? What am I doing? Before the movie even begins, we're greeted by a man appearing on stage, warning us of the sights and sounds we're about to witness. This was added to the film for several reasons, chief amongst them being that Universal were genuinely worried that the audiences of this Great Depression-stricken era may not be able to handle it. Don't forget that this is 1931 we're talking about. Seeing two lunatics sneak into a cemetery just after a funeral and digging up a fresh corpse was unbelievable. These same two lunatics immediately turning their attention to the corpse of a man who'd been hanged sometime earlier, and not only toying with the body, but cutting it down and stealing it. Again, no one had ever seen anything like this before. You didn't even talk about crimes like this, let alone watch people act them out for your entertainment. It was blasphemy. But yeah, that's our opener. Dr. Henry Frankenstein and his deformed assistant, Fritz, stealing bodies for the doctor's experiments. What experiments? Oh, nothing. Just the reanimation of stitched together dead tissue, the creation of something from nothing, the resurrection of life from death. And one perfect body is not the target, no. A pair of good arms could be salvaged from a body with broken legs. Dr. Frankenstein is dark, man. The last piece he needs to complete his puzzle is a proper brain, and wouldn't you know it, Dr. Frankenstein's mentor, Dr. Waldman, is giving a demonstration to his class comparing an exceptional brain to the abnormal brain of a criminal. It'd be a shame if that beautiful, perfect brain were stolen by a hunchback in the night, wouldn't it? Well, Fritz is an idiot. And he brings back the abnormal brain, not telling Frankenstein about the screw-up. Everyone around the doctor, from his fiancée Elizabeth to her friend Victor and even Dr. Waldman, are worried about him. He up and disappeared into the mountains, toiling endlessly on experiments that he refuses to elaborate on. The group arrives at the doctor's door to plead with him to come home, but the doctor doesn't see a worried and trustworthy family. He sees an audience who will be wowed by his work. With his sewn-together subject lying covered on a table, the devilish duo flip switches, pull chains, and power pulleys, lifting the steel apparatus high into the raging storm above. With a single bolt of lightning, he's done it.
It's alive! It's alive! It's alive!
The creation, though sentient and among the living, remains in the dark for several entire days as the doctor allows him to acclimate to, well, life. Before we see the creature up and moving around, we see Frankenstein learn that the brain he used was indeed the foul, evil brain of a criminal. And that's when we hear the footsteps ascending the stairs, approaching the very room where the two doctors sit. The reveal of the creature is as strange as it is terrifying. It enters the room backwards and without a sound. Just imagine what audiences in 1931 thought the first time they saw this face. Upon experiencing sunlight for the first time, the monster reaches toward the sky, seemingly in an attempt to capture or embrace this bright, warm being shining down upon him. When the shutters are closed, his demeanor shifts. He sulks. He reaches out to the doctor, asking for something. But what? For more light? For acceptance? For an embrace of some sort? Is this not him reaching out, but maybe asking, why? Why am I here? What am I? We can immediately feel the monster's pain. He's a monster only in appearance. This isn't a bloodthirsty, ravenous murderer. He's lost. He's like an innocent, sad child, oblivious to the world's every darkness and light. His body language and mannerisms throughout the film, to me, play almost like he's got the intelligence of a monkey. a lonely, confused monkey, which really bothers me and legitimately makes me sad. Fritz frightens the monster with a torch, and after going into a fit, it takes all 3 men to subdue him. Chained down in a dungeon once again, Fritz continues to torture the monster, cracking a whip at him and threatening him with flames, leaving the monster no choice. Upon discovering that the monster has killed Fritz, the doctors scramble for their lives. Waldman insists that the creature must be destroyed, and being that they can't overpower him, they drug him. This scene where Waldman plunges a syringe into the creature's back was cut from the film for decades, as it was deemed to be too violent for audiences of the time. With the creature incapacitated, Frankenstein returns to his normal life, preparing to marry Elizabeth. Dr. Waldman readies the dissection and destruction of the creature, only to be murdered before the process can begin. Now, the monster is on the loose. But again, he's not roaming the countryside looking for victims to mutilate. He doesn't understand what's going on. He's helpless. When he happens upon a little girl playing near a pond, he's overjoyed because she accepts him. She doesn't see him as a ghoulish, dangerous giant. Upon receiving a flower, he smiles. When she shows him that the flowers float, he laughs. And that's where it all falls apart. If the flowers float, she must float, right? No, the monster accidentally kills this little girl, drowning her in the lake, and he panics. He didn't mean to do it. He was just trying to have fun with his new friend. The entire town is out celebrating the upcoming wedding of Henry and Elizabeth when word gets out that the monster is on the loose. He even sneaks into the house and scares Elizabeth senseless. But when the townspeople catch wind of the little girl's death, that's when it really hits the fan. Pitchforks and torches, bloodhounds, an angry mob on the prowl. The monster's being hunted. Frankenstein comes face to face with his creation at the top of a mountain, and after a short struggle, the monster carries the doctor into an old, rickety windmill. The townspeople surround the building, calling for the monster's head, and when Frankenstein tries to escape, the monster throws him from the top of the windmill. His body crashes against the wings before plummeting to the ground. With the doctor no longer in the building, the townspeople take their torches to the foundation. The innards of the structure collapse, pinning the monster down. Screaming in agony, he burns to death inside the windmill, ending his short and painful life. Back at home, Henry attempts to recover from his serious injuries, and that's the story of Frankenstein. Jesus Christ. You know, for as horrifying as this movie was considered back in 1931, I think it's just as, if not even more so, sad. You know, the monster never asked to be brought to life. He didn't understand anything. He had no time to learn. He was brought to life, he was instantly thrown in the dark, he was tortured. His every second of existence was just pain. Frankenstein is a story that has been iterated on countless times. It has been rebooted, reimagined, remade, borrowed from, stolen from, but this story isn't the only thing that we're going to dig into here today. There are a million little details that we had to gloss over in order to tell this story in a timely fashion, but now I'd like to take a magnifying glass to those details. I didn't really get to focus on what Boris Karloff went through in order to play this role. In the novel, the monster is described as 8 feet tall, just this hulking mass. Karloff was 5'11", but camera tricks were not the only showbiz tactic used to accentuate the monster's height, which becomes clear when we see him standing next to the other characters. Karloff's boots had enormous lifts attached to them. The makeup on his face and head took over 4 hours to apply every single day of shooting. And back in 1931, Jack Pierce didn't have the same type of technology that we have today. This look was created not using latex, but tons of cotton covered with layers and layers of a substance called collodion. This stuff hurt to have on your face for this long, and to take it off, and that wasn't the only pain Karloff faced from this performance. His daughter has stated that Karloff required 3 back surgeries over the course of his life, and she attributes the initial injury to this scene, where the monster is carrying Frankenstein up the mountain. To say Karloff suffered for his art would be an understatement, but he did it with a smile on his face. He was always proud of his work, and never feared that he might be typecast as a monster for the rest of his career. He stated that a typecast actor is a very lucky actor, as carving out a trademark or niche for yourself is what anyone strives to achieve in any career path, which is hard to argue with. If there's one thing Karloff was not thrilled about, it was the drowning scene. He argued with James Whale for an entire day, hoping to cut it from the film. Karloff asked why the monster couldn't just have one beautiful moment, just one instant free from pain, but Whale was adamant that the scene was important to the climax. I find it funny that the film version of the monster barely makes a peep outside of a few moans, screams, and the laugh with the little girl, whereas the monster from the book never shuts the hell up. He gives speeches, he cuts promos, he's got a lot to say. Now that's a lot about Boris Karloff, and I mean, for good reason. The man was a legend, but he was not always the man who was set to fill the boots of the monster. Nor was James Whale the man who was always set to direct this picture. Frankenstein's original director was a man by the name of Robert Florey, an experienced screenwriter, actor, and director. Florey's vision for the monster strayed even further from the characterization of the novel, turning him into a killing machine. No complexity, no layers, just a murderer on the loose. One of the main issues was that the man who was set to play Florey's monster hated it. Maybe you've heard of the original actor for the role, Mr. Bela Lugosi, Dracula himself, the namesake of my dog. Side note, I adopted Patches as a senior when he was 8 years old. His name was already Patches, and I wanted to give him a little extra something so that he really felt like he was part of this new family. So I picked him up, and I looked at my girlfriend, and I said, does he look like a Patches Karloff, or does he look like a Patches Lugosi? She said he looked like a Patches Lugosi, and the rest is history. Now you know. Bela Lugosi hated the idea of playing a brutal killing machine who didn't speak. He hated the idea of being unrecognizable underneath all that makeup, but he didn't have to worry about it for very long. There are rumors that Lugosi was fired or that he quit, but neither of those things are true. Florey and Lugosi never signed anything. This first pitch for Frankenstein had no paperwork making anything official, so eventually Universal just moved on, and they landed on Whale and Karloff. Several film historians have claimed that there was a test shot filmed with Lugosi in the monster's makeup, but in nearly 100 years, that footage has never been seen, it has never been recovered, and nobody knows where it is. Dude, I would like to see that. As you might imagine, Robert Florey and Bela Lugosi felt a bit dicked when their film was dropped without a second thought, and eventually, the two would team up under Universal for Murders in the Rue Morgue. Now, if you're not a big Frankenstein fan and you just have an image in your head of what the monster is and what he does, you may have been looking at the footage from the film and wondering where the classic walk is. You know, the outstretched arms, the lurching steps. It's not in the movie because it didn't exist yet. This classic walk that the character is known for didn't show up until 1943 in Frankenstein Meets the Wolfman. Who played the monster in that film? Bela Lugosi. So while the man behind Dracula may not have been the original Frankenstein monster, he did leave an indelible, immortal mark on its legacy. The sets on this film range from simple yet effective to over-the-top and incredibly impressive. Some of the greatest visuals in the history of film, for my money, come from right here. First of all, yes, sometimes we can see the wrinkles in the curtain on some of the backgrounds, but you know what? That only adds to the charm. This movie is nearly 100 years old. The footage you're seeing now comes from a Blu-ray release. Trust me, it wasn't always this clear. No one ever knew you'd be able to see those wrinkles, okay? Anyway, the graveyard itself, with the tilted crosses and oblong headstones, please, this is what it's all about. The laboratory where the experiments are being conducted, are you kidding me? Look at the verticality, not just of the set itself, but of the shot. Look at this. 6-foot-tall Colin Clive is minuscule in this shot in comparison to the scope and scale of the set. And not just the size, but look at the tools, the machines, the electronics. None of this comes from the book, by the way. This is all created for the film. The lab of every mad scientist for the rest of time across all forms of fiction would draw from this. They still do it to this day. It's amazing. And you know what? We're going to get away from the backdrops and whatnot for a second to take a look at something I've always wondered. You know how Fritz dropped and ruined the good brain? He delivered the criminal brain, and that's the one Frankenstein wound up using. The thing is, the experiment worked. Henry popped this warped brain into his creation, and it worked. He created life from death. And we saw how it went. It didn't work out. My long-standing question is this. What if Fritz didn't botch the robbery job? What happens if Henry Frankenstein has a proper, exceptional brain to insert into his creation? Does the monster wake up talking? Does he wake up eloquent, intelligent, and capable of changing the world? I've always wondered what could have been. Now, this retrospective could go on and on. There's so much Frankenstein history to delve into, but I made it clear from the start, today's focus was simply the 1931 original. Now, is the sequel, Bride of Frankenstein, even better? Yes, sir. Is the third film, Son of Frankenstein, arguably the best of the bunch? Yes, ma'am. It's the best one for my money. But what about the 4th, 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th movies where this original universal Frankenstein monster appears? There's plenty to dive into on another occasion. Frankenstein's legacy is never ending. Its influence is felt to this day, and honestly, I think it always will be. In 1991, the film was entered into the Library of Congress National Film Registry. In 1974, comedy legend Mel Brooks would team with Gene Wilder on Young Frankenstein, one of my favorite movies of all time. Young Frankenstein parodies the first 3 films in the franchise, or as many call them, the Karloff trilogy. After the original, Bride and Son, Boris Karloff would step out of the boots of the monster, passing the reins on to several legends in the making. Karloff's name may have been kept a mystery in the film's credits, but his legacy is certainly no secret. From James Whale to Colin Clive, from Karloff to Frankenstein, from the Doctor to the Monster, this 1931 classic will never die. And if it does, I'll give it new life with my own hands. I'll scream it from the rooftops. It's alive! It's alive! It's alive! Oh, that's my Scream sequence retrospective on Frankenstein. You know, that may have been a weird way to incorporate one of the film's famous lines there at the end, but, you know, sometimes you gotta stretch, right? If you liked this video and you're excited for the next episode, maybe you prefer my Triangle X Squared Circle retrospectives or any of the weekly Let's Play style content, I could really use your support over on patreon.com/616entertainment. You can help me grow this channel, you can help me keep the lights on and all that good stuff. You can also grab a t-shirt on prowrestlingtees.com/616entertainment. And, I mean, I don't have any big butt shirts like my Charlie XCX shirt here, but I got some pretty good shirts over there. I should not have said that someone else has big butt shirts, because now my shirts don't look as good.